Aladdin, and on today's live stream, I'll be taking calls from ex-Muslims and non-practicing Muslims. If you would like to join as a caller, right now the queue is already full, but for the next live stream, keep an eye out for the next live stream on the channel and join in the live chat 30 minutes before the stream. I share a link for you to join 30 minutes ahead. But for today, thankfully, we have 8 or 9 callers queued up already, so we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. If you couldn't make it in for a call today, rest assured you can join the next time, and I hope that you can follow along while we listen to these callers. So yeah, the topic today is, there's no specific topic, but I'm opening the floor for people who either don't practice Islam but are in a Muslim community or from a Muslim background, or those who have left Islam. If you want to talk and share your thoughts, this is the space to do it. So without further ado, let's start with the first caller, Anna. Anna, how's it going?
Hey, is my mic working?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Yep. Okay, great.
All right, so yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're calling today.
Okay, so well, I think I'm an ex-Muslim. I prefer the term barely a Muslim or almost a Muslim because I think ex-Muslim is quite a heavy term. Being in our communities, kind of scary. But I think ever since I was a kid, I've questioned Islam. I've always questioned the fact that non-Muslims are going to hell, which is kind of extreme, just for not believing. I've always asked my family members, and scholars, they never really give a good explanation. They say God knows, or God decides what they want to do with non-Muslims. Who are we to say what God's going to do with them? And I'm just like, that still doesn't answer my question. Why would a merciful God destroy or eternally damn people who don't believe in him? Even if, but then people say things that contradict the Quran, like that maybe most of the people are going to go to heaven because half of them don't know about Islam. But then why don't half of them know about Islam if it's an eternal truth?
Mm-hmm. So you've been asking these questions since a young age, you say?
Yeah, since I was like 11 or 12. And at 20, I think I left Islam. I called myself an ex-Muslim, but I think that was for emotional reasons. Because back then I was quite angry at God, because why is there so much suffering in the world? Like if you look around, there's more suffering than peace or good stuff. So many kids are dying, and it's pretty awful. And that really made me question why your loving God would test you with that. I mean, it's and then if you don't believe in God after that, you're damned to hell. So the test is for nothing. But now I think, and then I think I went back onto Islam because I watched one of Hamza Torres's lectures against that one atheist, and he spoke about the Quran being a revelation and having miracles in it, which made me think, wait, if that's these miracles sound true, so the Quran must be true, so Islam must be true. So I kind of put all the emotional baggage, I kind of just ignored that. But then more recently in Ramadan, those questions about why the suffering exists, or why a merciful God would eternally damn people who don't believe in him, still lingered in my mind. So this Ramadan, I think towards the end, kind of just clicked. This can't be true. It's just a huge contradiction. I think that's the thing that made me question everything else. But I think if it wasn't for that belief that if it wasn't for that contradiction, I'd believe everything else, regardless of how brutal and awful it is. Because if A is true, if Islam is true, then all that scary stuff is true as well, and you can't really do anything about a dictator. So you'd have to follow it regardless. But since the contradiction doesn't make sense, if God is like a mother, which is the root word ar-Rahman, I believe, like the
The
womb.
merciful.
Yes, if God is the most merciful, like a mother would not damn its child to hell, the child to hell just because, or destroy or torture a child just because the child is being uh, aggressive towards the mother. You know, you see that kids rebel, the parents still love them
And
most of the
it's
time.
interesting that you phrase it that way, aggressive towards the mother. That's not even a fitting analogy, right? Because most, if all disbelievers don't actually believe in Allah, and then they're aggressive towards him, they just dismiss him because he's just one of many interpretations of God.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. It sounds more like a narcissistic God that wants all the attention, which just it just doesn't make sense.
Hmm. And
So I
how did
guess
it feel to finally admit that during Ramadan or realize that during Ramadan?
I think Ramadan is the most difficult time to do it because then you're fasting for no reason, you know. I didn't even eat in private because it felt too scary, you know. I think there's still a cognitive dissonance. Now I'm on the other side. Before it was I'm I only half believe it, but now I don't believe it at all. And I still fasted, and it was a really weird experience. I
Mm.
guess the biggest thing is not disappointing my family. You know, I don't want them to. Um, I think they'd be judgmental. I don't know if they'd hate me for it, but they'd be they'd think that who am I to say that I'm um I'm an ex-Muslim and I'm barely educated.
So that's something that you mentioned to me uh, earlier
Yes.
before you joined. This fear that you're not worthy of disbelieving in Islam, or you don't know enough to qualify as someone who can say, I don't believe in Islam. And I think that's very unfair because, as you know, if someone were to say, I believe in Islam, it seems like an interesting religion, they're celebrated. They're, mashallah, subhanallah, one new person joined Islam. But when it comes to people not believing in Islam, forget about being a critic, just not believing in Islam, you have to qualify that with so much research and studying, and you have to answer the question, do you think you're smarter than all the people who believe in Islam? Which is not necessarily a measure of, believing is not a measure of intelligence. So smart people can believe in very superstitious and very unprovable things, and sometimes even very silly things. Smart people join cults all the time. So it's not really an indication of anything. So don't let that deter you, that question of, am I smarter than every Muslim to ever exist?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. I see that. But are the people around me going to believe it? I've got some close friends who are Muslim, and um, I think if I told them, I think they're kind of immature and they haven't really seen the real world. So if they found out I was non-Muslim, I think they'd be devastated. They'd be scared, you know, and I don't blame them for it. Um, Sorry, I think I keep jumping from topic to topic, but I'll try to keep on what you're saying.
No, I hear where you're coming from. That you're worried about what people around you are going to think and how they're going to feel. And that's understandable. But it's important to remember or think about how you feel and what you think of yourself. It's one thing to acknowledge their feelings about it, but it's another to let it affect how you feel about yourself. So, because that might be the reaction, do you think that affects how you view yourself?
Um, I I don't think so. I think it's their experiences. I feel like if I showed them the Islam I see, probably change their perspective because it seems like I know more than a lot of my friends. Often I bring up things like Sufism or so some people don't even know that the Prophet married a child, or if they do, they try to justify it, which I understand as well because at one point I tried to do that as well because if you believe Islam is true, then you're gonna try to justify everything. Um, it doesn't
Yeah.
change my perspective of me. It changes my perspective of them or how I interact with them.
So how does it change how you interact with them?
Um, Probably keep secrets or keep my theological discussions or ideas to myself. Or if I do bring it up, I notice that they're not aggressive towards it, but they're shocked by what I say. Like how could you say that? That's not Islamic, or the Quran says the complete opposite of that. And I'm just like, it kind of gives me an indicator of what I can and can't say. So I can't really be myself necessarily. I can be part of myself, the Muslim side of me, um, the fake Muslim side of me, but I don't think I'd be able to live with them or be their friends forever unless they're more accepting towards me.
Mhm. That's a very difficult position to be in. Did you get any relief at all from not from realizing that you don't believe anymore, or from that admission to yourself that you don't believe?
I think it's so freeing. It's I can do what I want now, or um I can talk to people and not feel an anonymity towards them. Like I don't think all the non-Muslims are going to hell, or I don't worry about them. I think when I was 13 and I found out people don't believe in God, I was just devastated. I was like, these people, they're like the polytheists, and they're all going to burn in hell forever. But to know that's not true, I can build a connection with people who aren't Muslims. And I think that's very freeing. I can also just relax in my conversations and my relationships with other people. Um, I don't know if I'd ever drink. I'm not too sure. But it opens up that avenue. I don't think it would be the best to do certain things because of family and culture, because that plays a part in my life too, and I think that should be considered. But the religion is no longer the restriction.
Hmm. I mean, it's some people they like to do everything that their religion disallowed them from doing as soon as they leave, but that's not healthy or productive. You need to find
Yeah,
what you really wanted to do, what won't hurt you, that religion was holding you back from, that kind of thing. Then you're more than welcome to start doing. But yeah, it's important to remind ourselves that we don't have to just do everything that we weren't allowed to do just to prove a point, for example.
yeah. It's like the prohibition of alcohol. I mean, I can see why it would be haram, because it can have quite an impact on many people, even if it has even if one person becomes an alcoholic and they impact their family negatively, that
Hmm.
I think that can influence society. But then I think even the Quran says that sometimes it's that there's some good in alcohol, but there's mostly bad, so don't drink it. Um, but I think the fact that it completely prohibits something that could be balanced, um, that makes people more tempted to do the thing. The more restrictions there are on something, the more people are likely to do the thing. I don't have any research for that, but I've heard that people say that.
What I know from anecdotal experience is that um, Muslims, when they're allowed to drink alcohol by the local laws, or like if they go somewhere where Islam is not the driving force in people's behavior, many of them
Yeah,
do try to drink and they go overboard because they haven't tried to drink it in a more healthy way, I guess, if there's a healthy way to
yeah,
consume it. So some people go overboard just because of the restrictions that they grew up with. So it's important, whether you believe in Islam or not, to be careful with that kind of thing and don't just do it just because you have the freedom to.
yeah. I think everything's about moderation. People say Islam is a very moderate religion, but I don't actually believe that, because if you look at all the restrictions, it's not very moderate to um, kill someone or like stone them to death if they caught cheating. I mean, I think that's an abhorrent thing to do, cheat on your partner. But then there's no space for rehabilitation.
And it's always
So it's
framed
not
as
very
just
moral
the
relief.
cheating scenario, but people can be lashed and stoned for consensual, non-cheating extramarital relationships. It's not just the cheating
Yeah.
scenario. That's the easiest one for them to justify is, bring the villain and say the villain deserves to be lashed or stoned, don't they? But there are situations where you're not hurting anyone by consensually having intercourse with someone else.
Um, Regarding that, I think I'm changing my views on it slowly. But the points I have regarding that is, what if someone has a child outside of marriage and it would impact the child and it would impact the mother and the mother's family, and because they're not bound together, which I think marriage can itself has many problems. Um, uh, do you think that could cause an issue within society with children being born out of wedlock?
Uh, it can, of course, but it's hard to quantify. It's a one unidimensional way of looking at it by thinking that if we stone or lash or punish the people who have extramarital sex, that's gonna solve the child out of wedlock problem. But then it might cause way many more problems, and the amount of dysfunctional families that are together because
Yeah.
it's taboo to separate because of Islam, that's also another kind of harm. So it's difficult to just isolate it to one aspect and say if we did this it'll fix society when it's hurting society in other ways as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think uh, even as I came out, I have some rigid thoughts about society. Um, I think in a very idealistic way about society, but now I'm realizing that it doesn't really work like that. You know, um, it's not as simple as that. It's like LGBT stuff. Um, I'm bisexual, so uh, but then I think male homosexuality. I learned that. Um, Homosexual intercourse is the most dangerous. And I thought, hey, that's it. That's why Islam and religions prohibit it. But we live in a society where we've got a lot more security. Um, we've got protection. We've got medication to deal with it. So morality should advance with the time. And if and I used to say, okay, what if society, what if our civilization breaks down? Then we're not going to have things we need. But then I think we can adapt to that.
Yeah, and why should we live as if we still live in the desert with no technology or medicine or anything? Why should we have to contort the situation so that Islam would apply properly? Why doesn't Islam apply to the
Yeah,
situation we're currently living in?
yeah. Um, so there's something else I wanted to talk about. Um,
Mhm.
so I um, for a few years I've been quite um interested in near-death experiences. Near-death
Mhm.
experiences are, and this has changed my framework of spirituality in life. Near-death experiences are when people are confirmed dead by the doctors, and and then they revived. But during that time, they have an experience um, that could be considered quite spiritual. Now we can say it's thing in the brain. It's chemicals in the brain, or we can say it's a spiritual experience. But the uh, the experience happens. There's evidence to suggest that that definitely happens, and there's a lot of research done on that. Um, and in that experience, people say that they have a life review. They experience ultimate peace and security, and they leave their bodies. So they see their bodies from outside. The Yeah, so they see their bodies from outside their body. Um, what else did they say? So there's life reviews. Uh, the life
So,
reviews themselves
what
are really
does
interesting. All right.
what does knowing about these experience, how does that change your outlook on life, or how does it affect the way you view life?
Well, it I guess it shows there's something more than what's here on earth, or there is spirituality, there is a soul, and there is a God. But the people who have these experiences describe this God as not the Abrahamic God, just like the all-encompassing, loving God, or a source or a
But
light.
how
Um,
does I can sort of see how that could make you think that there might be a soul, right? If people are reporting that their soul exited their body and observed their body, which I'm very skeptical about. But if we say that that's what people are reporting, maybe you can deduce that there is a non-tangible soul. But how does that mean? Therefore, there's a God.
um, well, it means there's probably something more than this material. I guess if well, people describe it. People say that they come into contact with um ultimate mercy, or they are bathing in absolute love, which is a bit like what people experience when they have drugs, but um on this on the scale developed in this research, people say that this feels real, more real than real. What was the question again?
Yeah. How do you link the presence of a soul or something beyond the physical or material to therefore there's a God?
um what's your understanding of God?
I don't really have an understanding of God. I don't believe in God. So I'm trying to understand what you mean by that God that you now might be inclined to believe in because of out of body experiences.
I guess just the source of all things, the thing that started it all. um and I think the theology or the near-death experience framework is really complicated in that regard. With So people kind of aware that the source that they're looking at, the thing they're looking at, is the creator. They just know because of how the soul works. Um, hmm,
I
how
don't
does it
think I don't know if I
connect?
understand that. So you're saying people
Hmm.
just know it's God because some people have out of body experiences?
Um, Okay, so in these experiences, a lot of people describe that it's when their soul is out of their body, they don't experience things like they are when they are in their body. Um, they uh, they experience things as if they're real, that they're more real than real, and they can sense things without the other person saying that the other soul or the environment um, trans without them speaking it. So it's like a transmission of information. People often use the word that the information is downloaded into their brain, and I think that's because
So
um,
let's sorry to interrupt. I just want to try to help you get to the link here. So you're saying that some people might have some sort of clairvoyance or communication. How do you know that that is God?
hmm, hmm, hmm.
Because it sounds to me that just the presence of the unseen realm or or something indicating that there's something beyond the unseen is automatically wired in our brains to think therefore God. But there's no link between
Yeah.
that and the idea of a central sort of God.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. I think the reports, based on the reports, people have said that they have come into contact with the source. They don't really like using the word God, but that's what I'm basing this off. I'm basing it off what other people have said because I've never experienced that. So, and then people say that they experience their own, like they might see Jesus or Buddha or Krishna, the Hindu god. So it's not really based in religious teachings, it's more in um, people's own perception. Or like they give a name to it. I'm not too sure. I guess it's possible that the afterlife doesn't necessarily mean there is a God, but based on people's reports, people say that there is a source.
Hmm. And is
Um,
that compelling to you? Is that making you feel like maybe they're onto something?
yeah, because this God isn't, this source isn't like the God described in the Abrahamic religions or in any religion. In fact, a lot of these people say that they've reincarnated, that reincarnation is real, which is completely against Islam and the Abrahamic religions. Um, and I think the criteria for it is compelling. One interesting piece of evidence is people who were born blind, who are blind from birth, they can describe the room around them in vivid detail when they've had a near-death experience, which suggests that the soul has left the body and they can sense what is around them. Um, hmm. And there's some arguments against that, but if you look into it, the arguments don't really hold very well because the arguments themselves don't have evidence. Um, and I think
So
that's
why is it
compelling enough
that
for me to believe it.
it's compelling enough for you to believe? Okay, but you're just saying that it doesn't really hold much truth. So the question that I have is, why are you compelled to believe in something? It sounds like you're replacing Islam with something else, and you're just trying to figure out what. Is that correct?
Yeah. Um,
But
yeah,
you're
because
not
I
using any
think
different methodology. Like you're not. It sounds like it's very similar to the way that people would believe in Islam.
um, I'd say that the research done on this, there's about 15% of people who experience near-death experiences. It seems more tangible and more less contradictory than Islam or all the religions. And I think um, there's more research on it. I've got some sources. So it would Raymond Moody is the person who first conceptualized it, and these experiences have been found throughout history. The only reason they're more apparent now is because we have a lot more medical advancements that can help people, um, that can revive people. There's also Bruce Grayson, who's um, created a Grayson scale. Also, this is like this isn't this research is actually on journals, so it's not some random website. Um,
So does
it's
the
a verified research.
does the belief in these things, does it bring you peace or does it improve your life in some way?
Yes, greatly, greatly. I think I want this to be true. So there's enough evidence that there's enough to say that it could be true, and I really want it to be true. This is like the emotional part of it because um, uh, because it shows that this life is for nothing or the suffering is for nothing. No, the suffering is not for nothing. People say that they come to this life to experience the suffering for an experience, which is very different from a test. So it's um, and then that makes me feel more secure in the suffering that I experienced. And people who've experienced severe suffering, um, and there's evidence for this, like in newspapers and it's verifiable, and they've had near-death experiences, and they say that the suffering that they've experienced uh, is kind of harsh. The human hates it, but the soul does it to expand the soul.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't make much sense, but it's comforting enough for me. It's more comforting than the idea that this life is a test and God doesn't. Hmm.
Well, what if it's neither? I mean, if there is such a thing as a soul or, stuff that are beyond what is seen, how does that fill purpose or meaning in any way? Or how does that mean anything different than the test narrative?
Um, because I know, okay, because I know that, sorry, just a second. How does that, the best narrative? Because I know there's more of there's more of a loving source above, and it's more of an experience. It's more like learning rather than it being a test. So if I make a wrong move, it's more like, okay, let's guide you to the right thing, or it's more like working to working towards the best self rather than if you do something wrong, you're going to get punished forever. It's more of a growth experience rather than uh, walking around eggshells.
Hmm. Well, I don't want to take away from your piece, and I don't want to try to disprove your theory about life, but I just want to remind you that it doesn't have to either be torture and hellfire and testing or something else. Like there's that in between, which is we don't know why we're here. We're just animals, and we're trying to figure it out. That way, I mean, it doesn't really give you a neat way to deal with suffering, but it's not necessarily the whole testing and torture narrative.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um, that's good. That's what I wanted to share with you. Because it's the biggest thing in my life, and I've transitioned from Islam to uh, this idea. But there's a lot of research on it, so if anyone's interested, they could probably look up Raymond Moody and Bruce Grayson. Uh, okay. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you sharing. I know that there are many people watching right now who are curious about that topic. I am curious in the sense that I would like to see if there's any evidence to it, but it
Yes.
hasn't. I don't have a need for it necessarily, so I haven't really delved
Okay.
into it personally.
That
But I
makes sense.
appreciate you sharing it anyway.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad I got to talk to you. You're awesome.
Thank you so much, and thanks again for calling. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye. All right. Thanks again to the caller for joining. Um, my cat has been walking all over the keyboard and mouse and me. I don't know if you guys noticed him jumping on my shoulder. So if anything weird happened on the stream, that's him. That's his fault. He's right here. You want to say hi to everyone? He says hi. He has no choice. Hi. Okay. So taking the next caller. For those asking how to participate, for the next live stream, just join 30 minutes in advance, and I share the link to join in the live chat because we have a lot of people who want to join. So we've already got a bunch of people lined up today. But stick around, listen to other people telling their stories, and I appreciate you being here anyway. All right, the next caller, Sophia. I hope you're ready because I'm adding you now. Hey, Sophia, can you hear me? You are currently muted, by the way.
Oh, yes. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I had the mic. Say something again.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, nice to meet you, Sophia. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're calling today.
Okay, so I think, yeah, you and we talked on like the one-on-one sessions.
Hmm.
So, like, if you remember me at all, but
I
I
do. Yeah.
guess just to summarize, I'm an ex-convert to Islam. I kind of was like researching in like January of this year, which was like the second semester of my freshman year of college. So there was a lot of like trying to like me trying to like form my own ideas as to like what I believe in and just like trying to find my sense of self in general. And I feel like that part of me was kind of like taken advantage of when I like converted, I guess, like when I was like, first going into the mosque and like meeting other like girls and stuff. Like the second that they learned that I wanted to convert, they were just so like it just felt so overwhelming the support. Like it felt a little like love bombing, that makes sense. Like it was so much like support and love, and like it felt like weird, but of course I loved it because I'd never had anything like that before.
Mhm.
Like I've never had an entire group of people rally around me to like support me in something before like this. So I was, I was eating it up. Like I loved it. But of course, I feel like that all started to die down. I converted like pretty quickly into the process of like researching Islam. I mean, you might be aware of like the idea of like trying to get converts in as quickly as possible because like, oh, what if you die before you can become Muslim? You need to, I guess, save your soul, whatever, before you die, so that like, whatever, you can get to Jannah or whatever. So I feel like that gets a lot of converts in, but it's like the second you want to leave, then it's like, oh, but are you sure? Like, you probably just don't know enough. Like, it's blah, 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 blah. Like, now all of a sudden I don't know enough, but the second that somebody, like, expresses an interest to convert, it's, oh my God, mashallah, sister. Like, oh my God, you're so amazing. Like, subhanallah. Like, it's just such an overwhelming experience that I'd never gotten before.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was just really weird.
When did you first notice that? So you're no longer a Muslim. You converted and then you left. But when did it click that people are behaving differently towards you because you're a convert?
I feel like I had this little voice in my head that was like telling me, like, are you sure that they're being nice to you just out of the goodness of their hearts and not just so they can get brownie points with God? Like, 'cause I feel like in the beginning, like a few days after, like, I had been kind of going to like iftars and stuff like that before, like it was during Ramadan, so like, everyone's getting together, it's a whole thing. And I remember like there were these girls that they gifted me like an abaya and like a box of baked goods and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, you guys are so sweet. And like they continued to get me like more gifts after that, and I was like, is this normal? Like, is this a normal occurrence? Like, I don't know. Like, it felt nice, but I was still like a little suspicious from the beginning.
Mhm. And did that suspicion play a role in you leaving Islam at all?
I definitely feel like it did. Um, it, I don't know. Like, I remember like thinking, oh my God, like, these girls are some of the nicest people I've ever met because they're giving me gifts and they're, doing all these things and they're acting so kindly towards me. But like that, but of course, that voice in the back of my head was like, they doing this just to, yeah, like I said before, get brownie points with God, to like, get some sort of reward at the end, some sort of moral dessert, and not because like, they're a good person. Like I feel like that's a lot of like religious people. Like they just do good things because they think that they'll get to heaven if they do it. And like I feel like I was constantly thinking to myself, is that what this is? Now I think like, yeah, it just might be. Because like, I don't know, it felt like kind of like fake niceness, not like fake fake. I mean, I feel like they genuinely did think that they were helping me and that, they were doing the best that they could to like welcome me in with what they knew, because like most of them were born Muslims, so it's just all they know. They think it's the right path. They think that they think that they're doing the right thing, so I don't really blame them partially. But yeah, it it was just very sus overall. So, yeah.
I was just going to ask you about that because some people might misunderstand. Like they'd listen to you talk about this and they have this narrative that Muslims are trained in a certain way to invite converts, and it's all some sort of deceptive training, or something malicious. But as you explained, a lot of them probably thought that they're going to get good deeds for themselves, maybe, or even for you, that they're helping save a soul or something. Kind of like how, Christians invite people to their religion. It's the same sort of thing that happens. But it is still, whether they have good intentions or not, it's important that you're doing what you're doing, which is pointing it out to other people who might be experiencing the same thing. I guess it's sort of a warning or a wake-up call that all this love that you're receiving from the new group that you just joined, it's not how it's always going to be. And that's part, it's not necessarily because they love you as an amazing person that much. It's just they love the idea of you that much.
Yeah, like they love the idea of the white girl coming into the masjid to, think about converting to their religion. Like they eat that shit up. So yeah, it felt like I was a trophy. Like, I was the prized possession of the Muslim community at my college for like a little bit. Because like everybody was so supportive of me, and like, they had my, like, I remember I set a date to like take my shahada, and they like, they were like talking about it like every day in like group chats and stuff. And they were like, oh my god, like 3 more days and until she takes her shahada. And it was, I don't know, like I felt like I was excited, but I also kind of felt like I wasn't. Like I also was kind of thinking like, do I really want to like make this sort of like lifelong commitment? Like, do I really believe in this? And then part of me was saying yes, but then the larger part of me was saying no. And I was like, if you're wrong, you're gonna go to hell, but that's like in every religion. You're going to hell in every religion. So, what, like, so why are you fearing this one specifically? I feel like it was the whole, like, oh, Islam is the truth. And I remember, like, seeing this girl, this, like, convert girl on Instagram who was doing, like, a series during Ramadan where she was talking about all the scientific miracles of Islam. And I was like, oh, but what about those? Nah, man, nah, it's not real. Like, you can say that all you want, but you're not gonna change facts.
I'm curious to know, how did your interactions with all the people who surrounded you with love, how did they change when you left Islam?
So, I do have one specific interaction. So basically, I haven't told like 99% of my Muslim friends yet. They're just gonna have to find out when they find out. But I did talk to one of my Muslim friends because like we were just talking like, oh yeah, how's your summer going? Like blah 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 blah. And then she just goes like, how's the Islamic journey going? And I was like, oh, so about that. And then I went into this like I basically just kind of laid it out for her. Like, in summary, I just don't believe anymore. And again, like I'm not trying to attack you for believing. I'm not trying to say, oh, what you believe is wrong. Like I'm just saying this is not what I believe in anymore, and I've kind of lost faith, and that's just how it is, and I don't think I'm ever gonna like come back to Islam. But like she sounded like she was like supportive of me, but there was always this underlying tone of like, oh, if you ever wanna, say your shahada again, you can. Doors always open. Like, kind of subtly trying to get me to like reconvert,
Mhm.
and that kind of made me feel icky.
Well, I suppose, what could she say differently, or what could she do differently? Would you expect her to not mention anything about the Shahada? Would you prefer that?
Yeah, I would have, like, I mean, in a perfect world, maybe she would have said, that's fine. I respect your decision. Like, we can still be friends. Blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, not necessarily trying to re-invite me to join the religion, like just respecting my decision. Like I remember I said like I'm not coming back. Like I'm like this is a decision that I've made on my own, and I don't think that I will ever really be Muslim again at any point in my life. And I
Mhm.
think I did point out like a couple of things that like made me doubt. I mean, of course, I didn't, try to attack her or anything. Like, oh, you believe X, Y, and Z, or like whatever. But I did kind of bring up some things that made me like have doubts. Those two main things being like Islam's view on homosexuality and Islam's view on music. Or like it's complicated, but like a lot of people believe that music is haram and you shouldn't listen to it. And like that was really hard for me to deal with because I love music. I love listening to music. Like, I listen to Spotify every day. It's always been a part of my life, and I think that life without it would just be worse. And I'd be putting myself through pain by not listening to it for literally no reason. So, yeah, I was like, I can't reconcile with the fact that a lot of people think that, music is forbidden in Islam. Like, oh, no wonder, this high control religion forbids music, which often encourages free thinking and, you know, thinking
Well,
for
I
yourself.
want to ask you something. Um, so
Yeah.
some people might think this, especially believers might hear this and think, that is so silly. How would you leave religion because of wanting to listen to music and so on? So my question would be, if you actually believed in Allah, like you somehow were absolutely convinced, or you really, really believed, and you thought Allah said, don't listen to music, even though you like music, would you do it then?
I mean, maybe if I was in it for longer, maybe. Like if I
Well,
had been around for
assuming you
longer.
actually believe, like you really believe,
Okay.
and you genuinely believe that Islam is the truth and Allah is real, and Allah is telling you don't listen to music or else you might be punished. Would you stop listening to music then, despite you liking music?
That's so difficult. Oh my god. I mean, I feel like if I genuinely believed, I feel like I would have genuinely tried to maybe like, slowly like stop listening to music. Like, over the course of like, days and weeks, I would try and listen to like less and less until it got to like little to none. But I always like held on to the notion, like I always heard people say like Islam is perfect, humans are not. So I was always like, well, humans aren't perfect, we're gonna sin a little bit. And I was like kind of like the Islam I was following was like the notion that like Islam's a religion of peace and Allah's all forgiving and all loving and all that. Like, I was kind of being fed like, the rose-colored glasses version that like, the sisters were telling me so that, it would seem more appealing to me. But like whenever we would read the Quran in like group settings, we'd always like all the chapters were all about punishment and like hell, and that scared the ever loving crap out of me. And I feel like that was kind of like the final straw. I was like, okay, like once I'm out of this, like, I no longer have to worry about this. Like, yeah, again, like that was like the main thing for me. Why would an all loving God have a hell in the first place? Or just send people that don't worship him to hell?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be, the amount of people that I've spoken to recently, especially during the one-on-one sessions, who told me that they they either converted or barely converted or wanted to convert just because of the fear of hell. Like they didn't actually believe in Islam. They were just worried, what if it's true? And I've been thinking about it for a while. In what other scenario does someone provide evidence or proof or compelling arguments and also couple them with threats? Like imagine going to a judge to try to make your case, you know, say it's a land dispute and you show them the deed to the land and you also have guns with you and you say, if you don't rule in my favor, I'm going to shoot everyone here. You might be right legally, you know, you might own the land truly, but why would you use threats to make your point? Unless you need the threats. So that always struck me as weird. Why is Allah, like you mentioned in almost every verse, mention of torture and hell and in fear? Why can't he make a point without using fear tactics?
Yeah. Yeah, it always seemed ironic to me that, like, before every chapter of the Quran, it's always Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is literally in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Okay, but he's going to talk about hell and how if you don't worship him, you're going to hell, and how, you know, if your family doesn't believe, they're all going to go to hell, and how, you know, you need to believe you're going to go to hell, 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 fire, fire, fire. Like,
Hmm. But that seems to work a lot more effectively on people who grew up believing in it or have a lot more, you know, at stake, or maybe learned it in a more vulnerable place in their life. But I suppose if someone converts to Islam, it's easier for them to shed that fear because you don't have as big of an attachment to Islam to begin with. Or what was it
it
that way
was
for
easy.
you, or do you still have some latent fear, you know, of what if hell is real or what if Islam is true?
I feel like it was easier for me to deconstruct my beliefs just because, like, my whole life, I haven't really been incredibly religious. Like, I was raised Catholic, but even then, we weren't, like, too religious. Like, I did, like, First Communion, and I went to CCD classes, and we went to church, like, you know, Easter, Christmas Eve, but that was it. Like, you know, we weren't super duper religious. And I always kind of had that seed of doubt in my mind, like, you know, I don't know if this is real or not. So I kind of like declared myself like atheist agnostic when I was maybe in middle school. Like, you know, that was really when I was like, you know, I don't believe in this anymore. So it's like for like most of my life, I wasn't really like so hardcore like believing in a god. So I feel like it was easier for me to leave because, you know, like, you know, I had that foundation of not believing before or just questioning, and, you know, I trusted my gut. I trusted my intuition at the end of the day when I said, you know, this isn't right. And I regret not leaving sooner, even though I'm glad I got out of it sooner than, you know, maybe a few more months down the line. Like, when you look at it, when you look at the big picture, I was only Muslim for like a month. Really not a long time. So, like, it was such an ebb and flow. Like, it was a really weird time in my life.
So, what lessons have you learned from that entire experience that you can apply going forward in your life?
Uh, I've learned to not trust people as easily. Like, I feel like that was hard because throughout like middle school and high school, I didn't really have a close group of friends I could lean on. And like, you know, maybe I had like a few friends here and there, but none of them considered me like their best friends. Like, they wouldn't invite me to do things with them, and I always kind of felt excluded. So the one time that I finally got, you know, this big group of friends rallying around me to support me, I was like, yes, you know, I finally found my people. Like, you know, we're gonna be friends for life or whatever. But like, I feel like now I just need to realize that, like, people, of course, people aren't always what they seem, but of course, not to, you know, always assume the worst, but, you know, just take everything with a grain of salt. And also, like, there's no stress to figure out, like, to have some sort of, like, set truth figured out in terms of, like, your religious beliefs. Like, I'm still trying to figure out my beliefs. Like, I'm not gonna say that I don't necessarily believe in anything, but I don't want to pretend like I have all the answers. And I don't want to pretend like, you know, some fucking men from like the 7th century had it all figured out. Like, I don't want to, pretend like I can have all the answers, because this world is too big for us humans to have all the answers. And, like, yeah, like, I have plenty of time to, like, figure things out, and I'm not gonna figure out the meaning of the world or what's out there until I die, and I'm completely fine with that. Like, yeah, like, it's
Mhm.
just, it is what it is, and yeah.
Yeah, that is one shock that many people who grow up with a certain belief, they struggle with, because I don't think you had a specific idea about the purpose of our existence in the world and all that kind of stuff. You started adopting it when you joined Islam, but it was only for a short time. But if someone grew up with it and lived with it their entire life and they don't have it anymore, it can look like such a bleak world, with no purpose and no meaning and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like you're coping with it pretty well. So what words of advice would you have for someone who's struggling to accept that meaning that they thought was real is not real?
I think, like, just, it's gonna be okay. Take a deep breath. You don't need to have everything figured out, because we're all human at the end of the day. We are all, like, you know, it's safe to say that none of us have this figured out. And, like, trying to live a life based off of what, like, a God, like, wants you to do is just, I don't know, like, it's very restrictive and it's not healthy. Like, I realized just how much I was, like, restricting myself when I was, like, in Islam. Even just, like, little things, like, that seem, like, superficial. Like, I was, like, not eating bacon anymore, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Like, tastes so good. If pork haram, then why bacon good? That's what I say. But yeah, it was just those little things that I was like, why though? And like, yeah, the justification for pork being haram made no sense to me. Like, oh, pigs are filthy. Okay. I have chickens in my backyard. They take dust baths. Like, what's the difference? Like, all animals, like, are dirty in one way or another. You acting like they don't go through some sort of cleaning process. Like, I don't know. Like, it just, yeah. And also the whole attitude towards, like, women having periods and that being dirty and impure. Like, oh, I can't touch the Quran while I'm on my period. Like, what does that mean? Like, why though? Am I gonna infect it?
Yeah,
Like,
it's not
is it
like you're using
contagious?
bloody hands like to get it all over the Quran. Yeah, it's it's
Yeah.
this idea of impurity. It's simple. It's similar to how if you fart, right? Like you're not in a state of wudu, you're not in that state of purity where you're allowed to pray. Then I don't think it's haram to touch the Quran, but you're encouraged to go do wudu before you touch the Quran. But if you're on your period for similar metaphysical filth reasons, you can't touch it at all.
Clearly, like, it's clearly a religion made by men for men, because a lot of it just seems to revolve around women and controlling them for the sake of men. Oh, you have to cover the women so that they don't tempt the men. Why don't, men just, like, not be creeps? Like, isn't that easy enough? I know that the Quran says, like, lower your gaze for men, but that's like it for, like, their modesty standards. Whereas for women, it's like, you have to, like, cover your whole body so you don't tempt men. Like, since when did my existence become just for men? Like, oh, they say, like, oh, women have rights in Islam, but, like, every single verse that, like, talks about women, it's always like in relation to a man. Like, it's always contingent on, like, the rights that a man has. And I'm like, why? Like, can we just not talk about men for a second? We're talking about me. I always notice that, like, when they talk about women in the Quran, it's always like, and the women, like those women, like it's like they talk to men like they talk to them directly. It's like, you do this, when the women, they should do that. Like, as if I'm not even in the room. Like,
And it's
I'm
like
right here.
your
Talk
women,
to me.
to tell your women this, tell your women that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, talk to me. I'm a person. I
Mhm.
have feelings.
Well, there were some people who are curious, so I guess I'm going to ask you, did you get any proposals? Because some people seem to glorify the idea of a white Muslim convert woman.
Ooh, tea. Um, well, I did not, but the closest thing that I got to it was, so I think there was a Muslim man on Instagram from like another college in my state who messaged me on Instagram. He was like, "Oh yeah, I heard that you converted, and like I was wondering, like, if you had any questions, blah blah blah." And it seemed like friendly at first, like we were just kind of having a discourse about, like, my experience with converting, and then him like giving me advice and stuff, and it seemed fine at first. Then he just like kept like sending me stuff, and I was like, okay, dude, you're a little obsessed with me. But like, I feel like the one day, that the one message that made me just block him was, he sent me one of those reels that's like, send this to somebody that has beautiful eyes. I'm like, no, that no platonic conversation starts that way. So I just blocked him. And yeah, I was like, is he looking for a wife? Oh my god, he might be looking for a wife. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I feel like that's a rite of passage for a lot of converts, white converts specifically. Um, yeah, but I'm glad you survived all of that and you made it out the other side unscathed, hopefully. So yeah, I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so you said that you wanted to also maybe warn people who are considering converting. What exactly would you say to them?
So I guess I would say, like, I was exactly in the same position as you. Like, I was also interested in Islam. I was also like, given that narrative that, like, all these restrictions are somehow empowering, and that, women have rights in Islam and women are respected in Islam. Like, you're being fed that, like, this sanitized version of it, then it's easy to, fall for it. And it's easy to think that, you have all the answers. But, of course, like, if Muslims around you are trying to get you to convert quickly, there's a reason why. And it's so they can get you in quickly, you know. Join now, question never. I was about to say question later, but they don't want you to question ever. So, but yeah, like, just really, really, really think about it. Like, would this be beneficial to your life at all? Like, I remember before I converted, I was thinking, like, I need some discipline in my life. I need, a structured routine. I need some more mindfulness, but like, I can do that in other ways. Like, I can, take walks in my neighborhood. I can play with my dog. I can meditate. I can journal. Like, I can do all sorts of other things that have some sort of routine and structure and mindfulness, that aren't, believing in a God that, wants me to cover every inch of my body so as to not, quote unquote, tempt men and just control every aspect of my life. Like, so that, you know, I have this promise of heaven, of an afterlife, of, paradise. But yeah, I would just say, really, really, really think about it. Don't let them get you before, you know, like, yeah, don't let them get you in that early stages, before you start questioning and before you actually start researching and reading the verses, and you're like, I don't like this at all.
Yeah, and I want to remind people of a certain story in Islam. I can't remember if it's which hadith it's from, but there is a story of, I guess, let me tell you why I'm telling this story first. Some people might feel the urgency to convert because they're thinking, if I die tomorrow and I haven't said my shahada yet, then all of this ramping up to convert has been for nothing. I'm going to go to hell if I don't say my shahada. No, don't rush it. Like, it's not even that I'm telling you don't convert ever. I'm trying to echo what Sophia is saying. Take your time with it, learn all you can, ask all the questions. Don't rush converting, because even if you die, and I'm talking to you, as a Muslim, even if you die before joining Islam, but your intention was to join Islam, I think you're probably going to be safe. And here's a story to explain why. There's this man allegedly who killed like 99 people. That's a story from Islam, okay? And 98 or 99, I can't remember, but a stupid amount of people. And he went to a wise old man and he asked him, can I repent? I've killed 90 whatever number of people. Can I repent now? And the man said no, so he killed him as well. And then he went to another village to find their old wise man and ask him the same question. But he died on the way to that second village. And the angels try to figure out what to do with him. It's a very silly story, but the angels wanted to know, does he go to heaven? Does he go to hell? So they tried to measure the distance between the towns, and God moved him to put him closer to the town where he was going to go and repent. It's such a stupid, silly story, but the moral here is that God knows your intentions, and if you wanted to repent or convert, then God might count it for you as if you already did. So if you're a potential convert, take your time with it. Even if you die before you convert, you're fine. But more than likely, if you spend enough time, you won't end up converting at all, and you won't be scared of hell.
Yeah. Like, yeah, what you said. I feel like being scared of hell just takes up so much time and energy, and it's just not even worth it. Like, I remember, like, my mom always says to me, worry is a misuse of imagination. I always, like, think about that whenever I'm, like, whenever there's, like, irrational fear, which happens a lot with me, but, like, this is definitely a time where it's very applicable because, like, how do you really know that there's a hell? Oh, because God says so. Oh, okay. Like, no, that's not a good reason. Like, that's not enough reason. What
How do you
if,
know that God
I
said
can
so?
imagine,
That's the next
yeah,
question. Yeah.
like, oh,
But they
because it's in
never
the
seem to
Quran.
answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you know God wrote it? Oh, because I say so. Oh, who's you? Oh, you'll never know.
Or have you heard the excuse or the explanation that the Arabic is so beautiful and you need to understand it in Arabic and it proves that it is
Yup,
divine? Yeah.
yup. The obsession with Arabic was one that I hated as well. Like, this whole, like, idea that, you need to pray in Arabic and you need to, like, do the things all the way, like, the same way every time, otherwise God isn't going to accept your prayer. Like, so if I don't do this in Arabic, like, okay, like, God's just not gonna listen to me. He's gonna be like, blah 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 blah. I can't hear you. Blah blah blah. Like, it's just so childish. Like, nope, you're not speaking the language I want you to speak. I'm not gonna listen to you. Turn my back until you do it the way I want.
Hmm. I have to ask you this question that someone asked in the live chat. Angela saying, I feel like a lot of white women have been converting more to Islam, and I speculate it's because of their white guilt. Do you sense that there's any truth to that? Like, did race or racism have anything to do with your conversion story?
I feel like not as much as others. Like, I feel like it might have been a big part of others' conversion, but it wasn't that big of a part of mine. But I feel like it was, like, definitely there. Like, I feel like there is this sort of guilt of, like, I don't know, just not, I guess, doing enough to, like, I guess, combat bigotry and whatever. Like, I recognize the privilege that I have as a white woman in this world, and I try my best to educate myself and to learn more so that, I can, unlearn all my unconscious biases. But yeah, I definitely feel like it was kind of there. Like, I don't know. Like, it, I don't know. Like, again, I definitely feel like it wasn't as big of a part
Hmm.
that, it played as, like, others. I don't know. Like, I feel like if anything, like more than anything, I was trying to grapple with like my queer identity and like trying to figure out like what Islam really says about homosexuality. And I tried to like lean on to the assumption that, oh, the interpretation, that verse, like people are going off of the wrong interpretation. But I don't know, like, there's just so much out there that's against people like me, and hurts to see. And I was like, I can't be a part of a religion that hates people like me and says, oh, well, it's fine to be gay, you just can't act on it. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Mhm.
Help me to understand. Like, what do you mean? Like, okay, I can have attraction to girls, but you have to suppress it, you know, and keep it inside, never tell anyone.
Well, I'm glad that you don't have to battle with that for longer, and I'm glad that you're not suppressing yourself just to not go to hell. Yeah, and I thank you for sharing all of this with us. I know that it's not always easy talking about these topics in public, but if people like you don't share, no one's gonna know. And I'm sure that your voice today has reached someone who needed to hear it. So thank you again for that.
Of course, happy to be here.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
No, that's it. I think I want to give time to their callers, so I'll shut up now.
No, you did great. I appreciate you calling in today, and yeah, it was nice catching up with you again. And yeah, take care, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. All right, thanks again to the caller for joining. I just want to point out Xenon. Thank you so much for the super chat. I would highlight it if I could, but I'm struggling to. There we go. Thanks again. They say, hey, Aladdin, I love your videos. Keep them up. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. All right. We have another caller. I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm just going to add you. Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me? You are muted.
Hello. How's it going with me?
Good. How are you?
All right. Awesome. I'm doing great. What about you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
You look lovely today.
I look what? Sorry?
Lovely today.
Lovely.
I'm
Thank you.
being-
Thank you.
being
I needed to
that,
hear it.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you want to talk about today.
All right. So I am an ex-Muslim from Egypt. I have appeared here 2 times before. Some people might recognize me. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Sharif Gaber and a bunch of other things afterwards. But yeah.
All right. So
basically,
first tell
talk
the
about
people who Sharif is.
Oh, okay. Sharif Gaber is an ex-Muslim YouTuber who criticizes Islam. He has been he has a bunch of charges on him to go to jail, which are cumulatively going to be 9 years. Apostate Aladdin has made a video about it, and I think a lot of you have seen it. So, yeah, I wanted to expand on the situation in Egypt, especially when it comes to how Egyptian fascism works and how the persecution of religion works. But yeah, on Sharif
Sure.
Gaber's charges, in your video you call them bullshit, but I don't think you realize how bullshit they are. So, yeah, he recently got a new court ruling that gave him 5 years to jail, 5 extra years, for quote unquote inciting atheism. But I'm just hold on. All right. So, for inciting atheism, and I have read the Egyptian Penal Code. That's not a crime. It doesn't even exist, right? And yeah, his other crimes are actually unconstitutional. If Egypt was a democracy, he would be able to challenge that in court. But it doesn't matter if the regime wants him in jail. who the fuck cares about if the Constitution has free speech, which it does, by the way. So I want to mention that this court ruling didn't happen in isolation. It came among a bunch of other rulings. There was like too many rulings at once. So this has happened several times in different contexts. I don't know what prompted this time, but I think the most notable ruling is against Ahmed Tantawi. So Ahmed Tantawi is the main opposition to Abdel Fattah Sisi, who is our dictator. And he was sentenced to a year in jail with hard work for BS reasons, alongside a lot of his like supporters. So it's a wave of crackdown on civil liberties that expands to Sharif Gaber as well as other people. So now I want to touch on why someone like Abdullah Rushdie, for example, is allowed to spew what he does. Abdullah Rushdie is a guy that spewing a lot of insane stuff, but not
Wait,
someone like
give a
Sharif
little bit
Gaber.
more context. Like, what does he talk about, Abdullah Rushdie?
There's no such thing as marital rape, for example. Pedophilia is okay, things of that sort. Usually he talks a lot
he's
about
an
women.
Islam apologist, for those who don't know.
Yeah, he's an Islam apologist that is basically, I would argue, is a more conservative and Islamic version of Andrew Tate in Egypt. He's the guy that likes to talk about women, and how they're should be treated this way or that way. And this is despite the fact that Al Azhar, the largest religious institution, Islamic institution in the world, which is based on Egypt, does disagree with him. So he is going against the current by saying extremely misogynistic and other problematic takes. Now, I also want to highlight that when Sisi took power, 7 Islamic channels, I believe the number is 7, were closed on the same day, and later on the number kept expanding. But then there was also atheists who are publicly atheists, like Nawal al-Saadawi is probably the most famous example. She was very big, and Ismail Muhammad were allowed to say whatever they want. So it works in kind of both directions. So what's going on here? So so this is something that affects a lot of people in Egypt, a lot of individual people. It's not just politics or people who speak out or whatever. But to get there, I'll have to explain a political concept, and I don't want to be too heavy on the politics. I know that this is not a political channel, but I think I'll have to explain this. So there's a concept in politics known as fascism. The word fascism comes from the word fascio, which means in Latin bundle of sticks. It's an ideology about you have the state, right? And it's about prioritizing the state over the individual. We're coming in together. Fascism is characterized by something known as an out-group and an in-group. The out-group are people you blame everything for. So, for example, the Jews, the gays, the Muslim Brotherhood in the case of Egypt, the migrants, whatever group you blame, everything wrong with society is because of those people. And if we get rid of those people, everything will be fine. And the problem is, once you get rid of those people, you're only cracking down on civil liberties. Things are not fine. So how do you keep people in line? You have to expand the outgroup. This means fascism is a self-imploding ideology because the outgroup just keeps expanding. You can't have everyone be the outgroup. That's not sustainable. Another concept I want to explain is something known as the Overton window. So if you want to control that, by the way, Islam does this, religion in general does this. You can find a verse, for example, in the Quran that says, فِيهِ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَاتٌ. There is solid verses in the Quran and others that are prone to controversy, I guess. So if you want to force a group of people to think a certain way, the way you do this is not by telling them, here's what you should think. It's by allowing them to debate different ideas within a limited scope. So you have a circle of acceptable ideas. As long as you're operating within that, you're fine. But don't go outside that. Once you go outside that, you're a troublemaker. So, you can see this inside any religion where there's certain ideas that would be seen as blasphemous, while other ideas would be more debatable. So, how does it apply to Egypt and Sharif Gaber and all of that? initially, Abdel Fattah Sisi, when he did the military coup, he was selling himself as this guy that will save Egypt from the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the term Muslim Brotherhood is very vague. The name of the political party in Egypt that is referred to as the Muslim Brotherhood is the Freedom and Justice Party. The term Muslim Brotherhood is can apply to so many different things. It's a very vague thing. The Muslim Brotherhood was originally a political party in Egypt that was founded in 1928, a century ago. Why are we talking about those? It's like it's a vague term that is applied very conveniently. So that's why he went for it. Now, after he committed horrific things when he got to power, Rabah's massacre is a good example, where he gunned down around 1,000 protesters in the streets of Cairo, who were Islamists who were protesting against the coup. This is basically Egypt's Tiananmen Square. It was horrible. He mass arrested members of the Muslim Brotherhood. There was mass execution verdicts in trials, in sham trials. So, okay, everyone who was from the Muslim Brotherhood either fled the country, is killed, or is in prison. Is everything better in Egypt now? Well, no. He had to go after Islamists, other Islamists. So he proposed a bill to ban religious-based political parties. So you can't have an Islamist political party. So I want you to notice that the outgroup is expanding more and more to start to get closer to like average Muslims. Notice how that's the dynamic is going. And I will provide examples from my personal life, by the way. But yeah. So people he proposed a bill that bans Islamist parties, basically, or Christian-based parties. And the Salafist party in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood were kind of like moderate Islamists. The hardcore Islamist party actually supported the bill because they didn't want to be like the Muslim Brotherhood. And they allowed Christians into the party because that was part of the conditions of the bill. And, it was very weird. So, okay, now we got rid of the Salafists. Now what? Now we have to expand to devout Muslims. So I'll provide personal stories here. After the military coup, I remember going to a mosque to pray. And after the prayer, I started talking to someone in the mosque. And a plainclothes police officer approached us. And he told us, "Are you guys praying?" We said no. He said, "Well, I'm sorry, but you guys will have to leave." He was very nice about it. He was like, "I'm just doing my job. I don't want to prevent people from praying, but security measures and blah blah blah." So we had to leave. Like religious freedoms when it comes to the devout are very restricted. You can see this in sports club. So sports clubs, places where people play sports. If you have a long beard or you're wearing in a club, you're not allowed inside, right? Like this is a thing in Egypt. I remember also I was once at an airport. A police officer stopped me, asked me a few questions. To be honest, I think I would have done the same if I was in his place. I was a little bit suspicious. I was walking in circles for a bit. But anyway, I ordered an Uber and the Uber driver saw the entire thing. And once I got into the Uber, he asked me, "Why did he stop you?" And he told me, "It's because I have a beard." Now, here's something funny about Egypt. If you have a beard, it's very often that you will be asked, "مطول دقنك ليه?" Why are you growing your beard? And this is almost exclusively to Muslims. So let's say you have a long beard, a police officer stops you and asks you for your ID card. If the ID card says George, he will give you back your ID card and say, "Oh, you have a good day." If it says Muhammad, he'll tell you, "Why are you growing your beard, Muhammad? Are you Muslim Brotherhood?" Right? It's very weird. And I know Muslims. I know religiously devout people. I used to be religiously devout myself. I can see this happening. I can see how hard it is to be in their position. Not just that, even the khutbah, the speech that is given during Friday prayers, are also limited. Every mosque in Egypt always will have a police officer who's like, basically his job is to censor the khutbah, to be present and make sure it's like done the way the state wants it to be. And sometimes, because the problem with mosques is that they can be used as places of assembly, so they can like contribute to protests and whatnot. So if there's like a tumultuous period or the regime thinks that there's a risk of protest, they will straight up like skip the khutbah. It would be like 2 minutes, right? Like I don't think you've ever heard of that happening. So yeah, I remember
it sounds to me that sorry to interrupt, but it sounds to me that what you're saying is Egypt oversteps people's rights so often, and it's not just about them criticizing religion. But the sad thing is, people are so preoccupied with who they're supposed to hate that they're not noticing that they could be next. They could be in that outgroup. So they're happy to demonize the outgroup that Egypt currently has their target on.
I don't really agree with that, because the outgroup is starting to reach a point where it's including more and more average everyday people. Like initially, yes. Initially, the Muslim Brotherhood were very demonized. The regime was blaming them for terrorism, even though when the government was gunning them down, they were saying, our peacefulness is stronger than bullets, which is okay. And they were getting killed by over 1,000, by the hundreds. And yeah, like they were sure, there was members of the Muslim Brotherhood who retaliated, obviously, after these things happened. But the group as a whole, I'm not a big fan of them, by the way. I wouldn't vote for them. I think their governance was horrible. But I don't think they're a terrorist organization. Like by the way, by the Muslim Brotherhood, I'm specifically referring to the Freedom and Justice Party, just in case like there's any. I'm not referring. Yes, the Muslim Brotherhood 100 years ago was a terrorist organization. I believe that. I'm talking about the Freedom and Justice Party in Egypt. So yeah.
But don't you think, so I've seen a huge amount of animosity towards Sharif Gabir and celebration and glee and that
Absolutely.
kind of stuff. Don't you think that that's just people being distracted by, like, people are okay with what Egypt is doing in that situation, but they're not realizing that they could be next?
Absolutely. I think there's a degree of truth to that. However, I also think that there's other variables at play here. So there's a video by Thurman Trees, who is a YouTuber you recommended, who is great. He talks about the psychology of religion. I don't remember the name of the video, but it basically was proposing. He was talking about why religious people get offended when you even just as little as say that you disagree with their religion. And basically, he explains that religion is seen by religious people as an extension of their ego, an extension of their identity. It's part of how they belong in society. So when you even just as much as say as I'm an atheist, this can, or I'm an insert X religion, insert the religion of the person. They can take it as a personal attack. They can feel personally attacked. And I can confirm this anecdotally. I know a girl who, when she knew I was an atheist, she broke down crying, right? Like, she was very nice and sweet about it, but she still like felt very hurt by it. So yeah, there's also, I remember you yourself made also a video about it, explaining why people can be vitriolic. You were talking about yourself. You said it's not even because of scripture; it's because they're not used to hearing criticism of their religion. It's not normalized, and that's why they feel such religious fervor to attack ex-believers. So yes, I agree with what you said. I think it's, oh yeah, Sharif Gabir should go to jail because he's promoting atheism or whatever. I think that's part of it. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. But I also want to highlight something interesting. When I checked Sharif Gabir's comment section, which was before you made your video, it was actually quite wholesome. It was full of people with a lot of likes and a lot of replies and engagements, including comments by self-identifying Muslims that were like showing support.
Did you sort by
when
new?
I checked, no, I did not. I was checking by relevant.
Yeah, if you sort by new, it's a flood of just vitriolic comments. I know if you sort by top or relevant or whatever it is, yeah, it kind of looks like it's most people are supportive of him. But if you look at the new comments, I don't know if they're being auto moderated sometimes or not. But there are a lot of people who are really gleeful about it.
When you check the comments, were you sorting by new?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because after
I find
looked at your video,
that gives like a more accurate representation of the comments. Like, not just read the first 3 on new, but if you keep scrolling, that is a different view than just which ones are popular among the viewers of this channel.
I see. That's interesting, because when I looked back at Sharif Gabir's comment section after watching your video, I was seeing the exact same comments you presented in your video. Right?
Oh yeah.
So Yeah, the algorithm does funny things.
Interesting.
Yeah. So let me say a quote by a Christian pastor who was in Nazi Germany, who Hitler went after. This is a very iconic quote. Some people might think that this is like probably most people heard this quote. They might think that this is like a life lesson or like a good quote because it like conveys a message. No, this is actually someone's personal experience. This is what happened to a Christian pastor who supported Hitler initially, citing Christian reasons, and then he became a political prisoner in Nazi Germany. I'm gonna read it quickly because I don't think I need to read it slowly. It says, first they came for the communists and they don't speak out because I was a communist. Then they came for the socialists and they do not speak out because I was a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and they did not speak out because I was a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and they did not speak out because I was a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Now I want you to notice how the outgroup is expanding. It's communists and then socialists, a very adjacent group, and then trade unionists, and then Jews who were blamed for communism. Cultural Bolshevism is how they called it, or today it's people say cultural Marxism, which is like something the Jews are spreading or whatever. Yeah, and then they started going for like more average everyday people. So,
So, what is your message to the Egyptians who are listening right now?
well, there's a bunch of things I guess I want to say. So I initially was planning to talk more about the future and the hope, and that there is actually a very good chance that things might change in the relatively near future, because we can learn from the color revolutions in Europe, which happened a few years before the Arab Spring, or the Arab Spring itself, and like the factors and the variables that lead to it. However, this is like very. I don't want to speak too much about like what would impact the chances of this happening or not happening. It would be too political for this channel's focus. But I wanted to give people hope, but I decided that I don't want to speak too much about it. I feel like it wouldn't be very relevant. But yes, things in Egypt, like Egypt is a good country in many ways. It is a safe country. It is, relative to Africa, quite economically developed. It is, sorry, I spaced out there. But yes, the civil liberties are not doing very hot or very well. I agree with that. And our economy, even though it might seem good, what the regime is doing to it is just draining it. You can especially notice this if you're Egyptian, you can notice this with the dollar crisis, the foreign currency reserves. It's miserable. And what the regime is doing is not sustainable. The regime is basically allowing people in power to construct mega projects that are completely useless, like plant in the desert. We spent $16 billion making tents in the desert to farm in them, even though we have unused land in the delta, which is one of the most fertile pieces of land on the planet. Because, well, you can collect commission on these mega projects if you're a general, I guess. It's quite sad, but I guess I wanted to highlight something to more general viewers, and I wanted to ask you a question. So I think, to me at least, it's clear that Egypt is a secular dictatorship. The regime's own the way the regime sold itself is about anti-Islamism. We had secular pan-Arab nationalism in the Middle East, which was the dominant political ideology. This was during Nasser, Hafiz, Saddam, Gaddafi, these dictators. There was also the Shah in Iran. Things weren't doing very hot for human rights when we had these secular dictators. So I guess the question I wanted to ask you is, how do you define secularism? Because I've seen you use it in a way that I don't think would describe these.
Secularism to me is the separation of church and state.
Sorry, I got it. Oh, separation of church and state. So
yeah,
wouldn't you say that's the case already in Egypt, for example?
I don't know enough about the constitution of Egypt to tell you if it's actually that way on paper or not. Mm-hmm. But I know that religion can be leveraged and Like in this case,
Absolutely.
for example, even though yeah, you're saying that the regime is anti-Islamist and they would use the same kind of tyranny to persecute people they presume to be Islamists, they are still using religion to persecute someone who is spreading atheism, as you put it, even though it might be unconstitutional to punish them that way.
It's
But I
not even
don't
in the
think
penal
that,
code.
yeah, or it's not even, it doesn't have to be officially,
Yeah.
something that is an intersection between Sharia and their constitution. But the fact that
Yeah.
there is some overlap, that it's not divorced from the religion and the effects of the religion. So I don't exactly consider it to be actual separation of church and state. Plus,
I
and
do agree with
you
you.
got to keep in mind also, like on a lower level, the way that if you have a dispute with your, if you're a woman having a dispute with your husband and you go to a policeman, like there's still the influence of religion on how selectively they will apply the laws. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's, even if theoretically Egypt is a secular state, I don't think in practice it is a secular state.
I mean, we are officially an Islamic state. The second article of the constitution says Egypt is an Islamic state. And yes, religion is obviously heavily weaponized. You can find, for example, Abdel Fattah Sisi, whenever he gives a speech, you'll find two individuals sitting at the front seat who are not a members of the government, who are not part of the military, but
Are you still there?
he will dress differently to everyone else. The Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed al-Tayyib, and the Pope of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria, Baba Tadros Thani. And basically their job is to be yes men, right? So whenever Sisi says something and he wants like religious approval, it's like he points them to them, is this good? And basically their job is to say, yeah, very, very Christian or very Muslim or whatever. So yeah, in that sense, I would agree that Egypt might not be a secular state. However, I think we follow that logic. I would also argue the United States is not a secular state because you have the largest Zionist lobby in the United States is Christians United for Israel, which is based on churches. Churches have tax exemption statutes. Like
Yeah,
in
I don't think the U.S. is
Churches based on
completely
public trust.
secular either. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
evidence of documentation going back to I think it was the Iraq War, where there were people using religious language, like Christian religious language, in their briefings. It's not completely separated. To some extent, it's better than Egypt, but it's not completely a separation of church and state either.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember George Bush's speech, the Crusader speech. I conferred with God, and God told me. Yeah, that's we're invading Afghanistan because God said so. I guess he told George Bush personally. But yeah, I think if we take a purest definition of secularism, there would be virtually no secular country on the planet. There would be a few, but yeah, I think it's a spectrum, and that's why I call Egypt a secular country. Even though the constitution does say Egypt is an Islamic state, I don't think the degree of secularism versus Islamism or even Christianity, Christian theocracy, is just too large that I wouldn't describe it as theocratic. But we can disagree on the semantics. I guess doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
All right. So I guess this is what I wanted to say about Egypt specifically. I wanted to touch on a bit on something you talked about several times, which is the Dawah scene in the United Kingdom and what the British government should do. Now, the Dawah scene in the United Kingdom is insane. Like, let's agree on that. Like, I'm not sure if there's more Muslims in the United States or not, but for every like Dawa or apologist person in the United States that you can find problematic, you're probably going to find 20 from the United Kingdom. Like it's insane how far radical it is. And I think it's worth, if we're going to talk about like what the government should and shouldn't do, I think we need to talk about the root causes for a bit. Saudi Arabia, according to an article in Arab News, so I'm going to read this sentence. Over the past decade, Saudi Arabia, who would have guessed, has been the largest source of donations from Islamic states and royal families to British universities, much of which is devoted to the study of Islam, the Middle East, and Arabic literature. Now, I can continue, they break this down further, but I'm not going to save time. But yeah, this is really hurting both Muslims and non-Muslims, by the way, in the United Kingdom, because you have a foreign government that is funding, that is contributing to the spread of Salafism and Wahhabism in a foreign country to serve its own personal interest.
You cut out again. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Let me repeat. I think this is really problematic because you have like a foreign government that is funding its own interests in a different country in a way that doesn't serve the interests of that other country. To promote Salafism and Wahhabism, or Salafism and Wahhabist interpretations of Islam. And yeah, I don't know what we can do as individuals. Usually, if I'm in a more politically engaged medium, I would talk about what us as individuals can do, what direct actions we can take. But I really can't think of anything here. I think Saudi funding has to be cut off, really. I think the government is the only entity capable of doing that.
Yeah, I don't think the average British Muslim benefits from all that funding.
Exactly.
Because all it's doing is it's making people more extreme, and it's making the life worse for the average Muslim in Britain.
Absolutely. Imagine you are someone from Britain, you don't have Muslim friends, and you see the scene of Muslims, not the average Muslim specifically, but you know, the platforms that Muslims have in the United Kingdom and the kind of things they're saying. You're probably going to be like, a lot of people are going to be like, oh wow, Muslims are scary. I'm gonna be even more scarier and adopt white Sharia. Let's get rid of all Muslims and blacks and whatnot, and let's become a white ethnic state. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of people are brought to the far right pipeline. Even though, yeah, like it hurts the average Muslims in the United Kingdom. It doesn't benefit anyone. It just gives Saudi Arabia a foothold inside the United Kingdom. It's crazy that the United Kingdom is allowing foreign agents to do what they want inside their own country in a way that doesn't benefit them. Now, there is a very interesting debate on this topic that I want to recommend. It's you can find it on YouTube, where Mahdi Hassan, a great British Muslim, by the way, I think he's an amazing journalist. It's titled "The West Should Cut Ties with Saudi Arabia." So this is a debate with people who are pro and against cutting ties with Saudi Arabia, and I think for people that are interested, I think this would be a very great video for you to develop a deeper understanding on Saudi Arabia's influence in many respects. And it doesn't even cover like 10% of what Saudi Arabia is doing, but it's still like a very good start. So yeah. I also, since we're talking on the topic of radicalism, I also want to highlight something. I don't want to say, oh, religion bad, and then not look in the mirror. Have you been on YouTube, on the atheist circles on YouTube in like 2014, 2015? Have you witnessed what it was like back then?
No, I think maybe just a peak. Like it was, I think that was around the time there was the anti-feminism stuff, anti-SJW
Yes.
stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I wasn't a consumer of that media at the time. I just came across it.
Oh, okay. So let me talk about how crazy it was. Like, I would argue that out of all religious circles on YouTube at the time, atheists were by far the most radical group. And it wasn't even close. It was really insane. And we're not talking about like some like small atheist YouTubers or anything. We're talking about some of the largest atheist content creators, including the largest one. I'm not going to give names. I don't want to give attention to anyone. But basically what happened is those people went from talking about religion, criticizing religion, how religion is like fairy tales and it's not true and it can be used to manipulate people and can be harmful in some cases. And all of that is beautiful. That's great. It's basically not very dissimilar to what you do. And then they went from that to talking about feminism and how feminism is like a new religion and it's just as dangerous as any other religions. And don't get me wrong, they were highlighting actual issues with feminism. There was like some crazy things that were going mainstream in feminism. that I think were worth critiquing. There was a lot of misandry going on. I think it was good to highlight that. However, they went from there, and from like going to I guess a more reactionary position of like describing feminism as a religion, which is okay. Fair enough. That's not the problem, but they went from there to talking about Muslim feminists, because obviously you have Christian feminists, and Christianity isn't exactly a very feminist religion. But then Muslim feminists specifically, they were like, no, that's an oxymoron. Like, how can you be a Muslim feminist? That's like a cognitive dissonance. For some reason, they were going specifically after Muslim feminists.
I mean,
And
it is low-hanging fruit. It's pretty easy to criticize Muslim feminists, and I don't do it very much because I think it's better than nothing. But at the end of the day, it is an oxymoron, in my opinion.
I agree, and I think it's an oxymoron to be Christian feminist as well. But that doesn't matter. We need to we can't just say, oh, this person believes this way, therefore they should think that way. I think that's a closed-minded way to look at things. I think we should look at the individual and how they think and how they reach their conclusion.
And I think it's important to also weigh what is the purpose of this criticism, or what is it going to achieve. And that's not to say that you shouldn't criticize certain things because some people's feelings might get hurt. That's obviously not the way that I operate. I try not to hurt people's feelings, but if it's necessary, it's necessary. But it's important to know who your audience are and what you're trying to achieve with that criticism. So those people who are criticizing Muslim feminists at the time, it sounds just like it was low-hanging fruit and it was easy, and it wasn't really helping Muslims or feminists or women. It was just for people who want to shit on both, on Muslims and on feminists, to enjoy that content.
Wait, it will get better. Don't worry. This is not the end.
I'm somewhat familiar with some of like I watched a video by who was it? Damn it! Now their name is escaping my mind. But I've watched a few videos on that topic, but thankfully I wasn't consuming that content at the time.
All right. So here's what happened afterwards.
I have to remind you though that we have to wrap up soon because we still have other callers to get to. But yeah, let's.
All right. I'll try to be quick. Anyway, they went from criticizing feminism to criticizing Islam all of a sudden, and many of those people clearly didn't have basic knowledge about Islam, but they still made their channel mainly about Islam, and they talked about it for years. And then there was the migrant crisis, and it was about Muslims and how Islam is incompatible with the West, and why there's all of these issues happening with the migrants. But then hold on, not all of the migrants were Muslim. There was also a lot of Africans, for example. They were like, oh, it's also black people, and all of a sudden they were talking about race and IQ and how black people are inferior. It's like, how did we get there? It's like you went from talking about why religion is not true to black people are inferior. It's like, hold on a second. It was insane. And there's also another guy. I'm not gonna name him. Please, if anyone knows who I'm referring to, don't name him. He was a pedophilia apologist. Basically, Singapore is a dictatorship. It might be advanced in many ways, but it's a dictatorship. There's blasphemy laws there. People do get arrested for criticizing Christianity and Buddhism all the time. There was this guy that got arrested for criticizing Islam, so he became some sort of a martyr because free speech and how Islam is impeding free speech and all that. Fair enough. That guy, though, was promoting pedophilia. And what do I mean by that? Like lowering the age of consent to, I don't know, a lower number? No, like straight up, it's okay to have sex with a 6-year-old kind of pedophilia. It was insane how low the atheist circles on YouTube went. So I think it's important. My message here is we need to look in the mirror sometimes. We can't just get on our high horse. Oh, as atheists, we're not like those delusional religious people. We are more pro-human rights because we are secular or whatever. No, I think we shouldn't get caught up in that. You have atheist countries like North Korea and China that are not good places for human rights. It's very possible for atheists to be the same or even worse. And
I think it's difficult for people not to pin it on religion when they see
absolutely
that people in their life are using religion actively. And on the other hand, we have people who are irreligious, I suppose, living in places where there is more of a version of secularism than in Muslim countries, and they're treating them and everyone else better. So I don't think that it's not that it's impossible for a secular state, for an atheist to be a terrible person. It's just that for a lot of us, the correlation right now is religion. And it's difficult to always keep saying, well, it's not just religion, this could just be
Absolutely, yeah.
fascism in general. This is just a power trip. Sometimes you just have to talk about this, the topic specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was earlier talking about Islam and the narrative being promoted in the UK and how it's a problem, and why I think what you're doing is good, by the way, criticizing and calling out those people. I don't know if it's enough because their platform is obviously going to always be bigger. I think that's just the reality of it. But I still think it's very, very valuable to have a platform like yours that is healthy, that is calling out those people, because they do deserve to be called out. And I think that's very valuable. And yes, I completely agree with you. The only thing I'm highlighting is that just because we don't have that, everything will be pink. There's more to it than that. We shouldn't become complacent, is what I'm saying. But it is true that yes, religion can oftentimes be a vector to promote this kind of issues, 100%. For example, you mentioned homophobia. I remember you talked about like Muslims in the West, oftentimes like celebrate when certain groups like gay people get persecuted. And I was like, initially I was like, wait, that sounds true, but let me look it up, right? I was actually surprised because in the United States, 80% of Muslims, 80% of the American population support. Let me find it exactly. Favor laws that would protect gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people against discrimination in jobs, public accommodations, and housing. 80% of the American public support that, as opposed to 70% of Muslims. Now, it's worth mentioning that the people that oppose these laws oftentimes cite incompatibility with religion. So yes, absolutely, religion is responsible for those 30%. But I was surprised that it's 70%. I was expecting much lower. This study is from the Public Religion Research Institute. It's from 2022. So this is like relatively recent.
I'm very curious to know what the sample size is, because most Muslims that I know are beyond, they would not even say, yeah, I support the laws, but I disagree with it. And it's not just because I know very religious circles. It's just, it seems to be the reality I'm always coming across. So I'd be really curious what the sample size was and how they chose that sample.
I actually don't have it, but I can send you the study if you want to look at it later. The total sample size is 23,000 people. I don't know how much Muslims specifically. But yeah, it's I guess it's quite a big study.
I mean, that depends on how many Muslims. If it was 100 Muslims, then not really a big study. If it was all on like one university campus, then we can't do anything with that.
Oh, fair enough. I also did look up something else, which is Muslim politicians in the United States. So you had a nominee for the Senate, a Republican nominee, which is Dr. Oz. You have four members of the House of Representatives: Keith Ellison, Andrew Carson, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib. I looked the LGBT views of all of them, and they were all openly in favor of it. Now, I'm not saying homophobia doesn't exist in the Muslim community. I just think that the idea
that's something that I don't think carries any weight, a Muslim politician's public stance, because a lot of their supporters are the same kind of people who are pro-LGBT and pro-immigration and very anti-racism. So they can't just come out and say, "Yeah, I'm against LGBT marriage." Like that's just not an option if they want to get elected. I don't think it carries any weight what their public position on it is.
I think it's actually very possible for a Muslim politician to run on an anti-LGBT platform, because many people already do. And
yeah, but those people, like, then they have to appeal to a Christian base or a right-wing base, but they're not appealing to that. They're appealing to the left wing, and they are not going to be okay. Like, they're going to lose their supporters.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I don't think it carries much weight.
Individuals, yes.
Yeah.
These specific individuals, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting point. I haven't thought of that. I think that's a good point to raise.
Yasser Qadhi was talking. I remember Yasser Qadhi was talking about an instance of a Muslim politician in the U.S., and he didn't want to name names, of course, who supports these things in public because they have to, but then they talk to him about it in private. And he was talking about how, you have to do what you have to do to get elected, but that doesn't, like, you don't have to be openly anti-LGBT. So funny enough, I'm sure you've heard of the accusations of taqiyya. This kind of applies, right? Like this kind of applies. Yasir Qadi is telling people, as long as we're not in the majority, you got to do PR for Islam. Like he's just saying it. So, that I don't like this kind of alarmist rhetoric. I don't want to tell people that Muslims are plotting against you. But Yasir Qadi says it out loud that when it comes to certain politicians in the US who are Muslim, they conceal their actual views on these things.
Do you think it's 70%?
I don't believe for a second that 70% of Muslims in the US are pro-LGBT rights. And that might be anecdotal, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I highly struggle to believe that, because just among the people that I met, I'm not saying that they're all raging homophobes, but at best, a lot of them are like, you know what, it's not my thing, but I don't want to get involved, but like, I think it's icky, and I don't know, like, I don't want to be involved in that decision-making process at all. So I highly doubt that 70% of them would actually say, you know what, I support it. More power to them. But yeah.
By the way,
it's a
I
very...
want to apologize. I know. I was trying to like keep it brief. I was like trying to go through like points, but I know I took like a lot of time still, despite my best attempts. So I really apologize for that and for the next callers. But yeah, I just want to mention something about the study. It is from across the 50 states, but I'll send it to you and you can look at it later.
Sure.
And thank you for having me. And
of course,
sorry again for taking too long. All right. Have a great day.
Yeah. You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right. Thanks again to the caller. We still have a few callers. I'll try to get to all of them, but I only have maybe another hour or so, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. So I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. So Cheese Tax, I hope that you're ready, because I'm adding you to the live stream now. Hey, Cheese Tax, can you hear me? You are muted. I hope that they are here. Yeah. Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's good. How are you, Aladdin?
I'm doing all right, thanks. So tell me a bit about yourself.
I was listening to the live chat, actually. I wasn't aware that I...
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, there's a bit of a delay between the stream and this. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, so tell us a bit about yourself and what you want to chat about today.
So first, I want to say that I'm very happy to be on one of your lives. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you also for all your work, and I really admire your character and your work. So thank you very much. And I also want to say that English is not my first language. So if you can't understand me sometimes, just feel free to stop me.
No, I'm sure you'll be fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm from a Muslim country, but it's not a country that is really... they're practicing Islam, but only when they see people. Like, I don't know if you understand me. Like, they dress modestly, they pray if someone comes to their house, but deep inside of them, I don't think that they really believe it. But anyway, it's not the focus of the lab chat. So anyway, about me, so from a young age, I'm not really... it's not that I had doubts, but I wasn't really interested about learning it. Of course, I was a Muslim, but I wasn't really interested about learning about Islam or anything concerning Islam. But what really pushed me away, weirdly enough, it was the Muslims first. It wasn't like the Quran or the Hadith or anything like that. It was primarily Muslims that really bothered me. Let's see. I don't want to sound Islamophobic or something, but that was my main reason first. And the problem was that I didn't agree with Muslims. most of the time. So anything that had to do with LGBTQ. So the question you asked earlier in the live chat. So yeah, the LGBTQ community was one of my main reasons that like pushed me from Islam. I'm not part of that community, but I don't even know anyone from that community. But the way Muslims were talking about them and the way Islam in general treats them, I wasn't agreeing with it. So I was like, oh wait, you know what? It's not for me. And I used to hear like the most horrendous stuff from Muslims. They were saying stuff like, you need to gather all the LGBTQ and burn them alive, or stuff like that. And they were saying the same thing about the Jews or the polytheists and stuff. Like anybody that doesn't agree with them, they had to say really horrible stuff about them. So I wasn't. So that was one of the reason, and
So
the other reason was
I want to ask you before you get to the next reason. So
yeah,
you were a Muslim at the time, loosely. I mean, you said that you weren't that interested in looking up things about Islam. But when you heard these things that sounded horrible to you from other Muslims, what did you think about the religion? Like, did you think that they were behaving worse than Islam told them to? Or did you think that their behavior is caused by the religion?
Yeah, I was getting to that point actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was what I was thinking when I was young, like before 15 or something like that. But at some point I realized that if every Muslim thinks the same way, it's because they have the same source, and that source being the Quran and the hadiths and
But
the
not every
scholars
single Muslim thinks the same way. But you're saying the ones that do, they have the same common source. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I went into. I started looking into the Quran and the Hadith, and it was worse actually than what I thought, because in my head from a young age I wasn't really religious. I used to pray, of course, because I grew up in a Muslim country and in a Muslim family, so I was praying, I was fasting during Ramadan and all of that, but sorry, what was I saying? I forgot my truth.
That you weren't that religious, but you were practicing.
Yeah, I was practicing, so I wasn't really reading the Quran. But then when I started reading it, I saw that it didn't make any sense. First of all, there's no sense, there's no logic, there's no chronology, there's nothing that. It doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me. And then it was full of violence and sexism and all the stuff that I didn't agree with. And then when you start listening to the apologists on YouTube, or even in Muslim countries, you see them on TV, like almost like on every channel. So when I used to listen to them, I was shocked. I was shocked by everything they were saying. So at the end, I was just like, okay, so I don't believe in the Quran, I don't believe in Hadith, I don't believe that the Prophet is one of the best men on earth or an example for humanity. So I was like, what's the point then? Like at the end, I'm just not believing all of that, but still I was practicing for the sake of my family, let's say. But recently, like a year ago, I started watching documentaries about cults, and that's when it really hit me that there's too many similarities between cults that I was seeing on TV and Islam. And if you don't mind, I wrote some things down. Let me try to.
That is, by the way, while you're finding those things, I want to tell the audience I'm working on a upcoming video, hopefully, where I talk about, is Islam a cult? I try to answer that question. And I'm sure the caller today is going to touch on a lot of things that will be in that video, but, look out for that video anyway. So, yeah, what did you want to mention about cults?
Yeah, I just have a short list. So my
Mhm.
first point, my first similarity that the first similarity that that I've seen is the prophets. Like almost every cult has a prophet. It's basically a man, almost always a man that hear voices. That he's the only one hearing that voice. Like nobody else is near him when he's hearing those voices. He's the only one. And then he has many wives. Like all the prophets, almost all the prophets have many wives, and young ones, not rarely old ones, always young ones. And then I know that the apologists try to justify that by saying that there are more women on earth than men. But then why do prophets choose young women? Why don't they choose widows or women that need help? Or even like, why do they have to have many wives? Why can't they contribute? Why don't they use that time and money to, I don't know, adopt orphans?
Yeah,
Or at
that's.
least like
I mean,
do something
apologists say that a lot of Muhammad's wives were either for political alliances or they were widows or something of the sort. But like you, I always wondered why couldn't he just start maybe the first women's shelter? You know, instead of actually
Exactly.
sleeping with them. Like, why he's a man of God, he has the means to do it. Why doesn't he create a system for women who are who are desperate for help instead of then trying to sleep with them when they're desperate for help?
Exactly. Like you can have multiple wives if you want to help them, quote unquote, but you don't have to sleep with them. Like I know it's weird, but you don't have to sleep with them. You don't have to involve sex in all that arrangement anyway. But what was I say? Sorry.
You're
So
talking
yeah,
about
for
yeah.
the cults, so it's the prophet is looking for power and control. That's the main similarity between the cults. They're not looking to spread kindness or anything that looks good. It's just about them having control and power. And it's always like just a random guy that wants control and power, and he's just like and he tells himself that it's already happened before, so why not him? Like in history, like there's a lot of prophets. Like even in recent times, there you can always see someone pretending to be a prophet. So the
I mean,
second similarity,
it's funny you mentioned that or you phrase it that way. Someone pretending to be a prophet. Is there any other way? Has there ever been
no,
someone who's proven to not be pretending?
no, they're all pretending, of course.
Yeah.
And I want to let me finish that list, and I wanted to talk about something else too. So the second similarity, it's about control. So every cult wants to control the way you dress, the way you talk. For example, in Islam, you always have to say Subhanallah. You always have to say Inshallah. Like when a Muslim talks, you know he's a Muslim or she's a Muslim by the way they talk. And then they control what you can eat, what you can do, like almost everything actually. And the third point, it's that you can never criticize it. You cannot criticize the Quran. You cannot criticize the Prophet. You cannot criticize the Hadith. You cannot criticize anything without sounding like you're arrogant or that you're possessed, or there's always something wrong. It's impossible to criticize it, and I think that's also why you can't live Islam without putting yourself in danger.
I don't like the way that you phrase that, putting yourself
And
in danger, because it implies that you're the one who's doing something to be
yeah,
in danger rather
that's
than
what I had for the list.
yeah. So I guess what you meant to say is you can't leave Islam, or a lot of people can't leave Islam or can't criticize Islam without being in danger.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, because the way you said it, you said without putting yourself in danger, it kind
Hello?
of puts the blame on you. Can you hear me, or it sounds like we've disconnected?
Hello.
All right, it sounds like the caller is having some issues. Let's try again. Hey, can you hear me now? Are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yeah, it sounds like we've lost the caller, unfortunately. Okay, that is too bad because I wanted to hear them out. Hey, Cheese, are you there? One last time. No, doesn't seem to be working. Okay, well, I hope you can join again in next week's stream. I'm sorry that our conversation is being cut short. But yeah, it seems like we're having some technical difficulties. I hope you could check your earphones or whatever you're using. Maybe that's what broke. In the meantime, I will take the next caller. I hope that you're ready, son, because I'm adding you to the live stream now. Hey, son, can you hear me? You are muted. I would love to have a studio set up where someone deals with, taking in the callers behind the scenes and unmutes their mics and everything. Hey, son, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, how's it going?
Oh, we are live. I'm
Yes,
sorry,
we are
this is
live. Yeah, sorry, I should
okay.
have made that clear. How you doing?
Okay. Yes, I'm great. Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to finally talk to you, Aladdin.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you're able to join. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're calling today.
Well, like we talked before, but like a long time ago, I believe like 2 years ago, I joined like in one of these call sessions, and at that time I was a newly ex-Muslim, and I said that the reason that I mainly left was some of the new information that I learned, for example, like the age of Aisha and like all the pedophilia and the slavery and all that stuff. Even though like those some of those information, they were still there, like like the stuff about slaves, but when you are in that limbo, there are people there around you that telling you that it's all good, it's all fine. You don't really allow yourself to think clearly. But like as I grew up, I like started doing my own research, but not specifically for debunking Islam or anything, but just for understanding, for my own sake. And I just found things, every single time I would be like slightly confused or disappointed. And then after I left Islam completely, and now when I am again, like I was like watching Sharif Gaber's videos, very interesting videos. Like he does a lot of research, and his videos are really, really informative. And I learned a lot. And as I said, every time I start searching about Islam and reading more about it, I find new, more disgusting details. It's it's almost like hilarious. Every single time there is something new that will either shock you, but mostly disgust you. And
So I have a question that might sound rude,
yeah,
but
sure.
I'm actually just very curious. So I'll be blunt. Why
No,
do you
don't.
keep digging?
No, I don't. Okay, let me explain. It's not like I do this constantly, like 24 hours. As I said, there's been like a time of 2 years where there are some times when I don't care. I don't really care. I'm like, I don't believe it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to follow any rules. I just want to live my life easy. But then I also time to time, like for example, I follow your channel. Time to time, I just like to tune in back and just get get more information into perhaps it's just to again, this is a subject that has always been something that interested me, both as a Muslim and as an ex-Muslim, because um, like history interests me a lot. History fascinates me a lot. And I was always very much interested into learning the Islamic history, but I was often I would often being given I often like found books which were very biased, and I did not like that thing. I was like, why it's so biased? It's like only saying good things, but it's not being truthful. How do I explain this? Like, for example, I grew up in a non-Muslim country, and while reading history, while studying history, we would study everything about Christianism without any sort of sugarcoating or manipulating. Like, they wouldn't cut out any parts. Everything is there, and I think that's like this is how it should be. But it's not like this for Islam. Like when I found out about Aisha's age, I went on internet and searched different research paper, and I often found some papers which were completely like justifying it, saying that usual stuff. Back then it was normal, blah blah blah. Some will say no, it's not accurate. Some say it's this age, some say it's this age, etc., etc. But whatever. Like at the end, it's the same thing. And so that's something that specifically studying like Islamic history, something that bothered me is that it is hardly ever biased. Am I saying this correctly?
Hardly ever unbiased. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So yes, that's what I try to say. Like there's always some sort of agenda there. The person who's writing it, they just want to like convey the best version, the watered down best version, the sugar coated version, but not how things are. Because I don't know, maybe they know deep down that if people are gonna read it, they'll be disturbed by by some information, and that's why they cut it out. That's like I don't know.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
So
you
yeah, that's
still look into Islam sometimes out of interest because you
yes.
like to learn about
Sometimes out of
history.
interest.
Hmm.
Yes. From time to time, I just get back into it. As I said, like from your videos, I found out about Sharif Kaber, and I looked on in his YouTube video, and I started watching. Like I watched like a couple of his videos, and like I found them really interesting. And there's again like he like really gets into the nit bits of everything. Like the last video that I was watching was about the history of Quran, like how it came into existence. And when while I was watching it, every time I would like stop and get back and like read about it, read the sources, and like at the end, it all makes sense. Like, if you really think about it, a book that was written 1400 years ago, it has been unchanged. Nothing has changed from that time until now. Like, how much do you want to lie to yourself? A critical person would say it is nearly impossible. Surely something has been changed. And in fact, this is how it is. But like
I
the
think
Muslim
that
scholars
people
always
focus too much on whether something has changed or not, that it's playing a game that Islam has forced us to play, but it doesn't really matter whether or not a book was preserved in the bigger picture. I mean, it might still be interesting to find out that it wasn't, but it's important to remind ourselves that even if it was, it doesn't mean anything. Like about
Yes, at this point,
the divinity
yeah.
of
Now that I think
Islam.
of it, yes. Now that I think of it, you're right. It doesn't matter at the end. Like, it doesn't matter if it was changed or not. But the version that we have right now is like I'm quite sure that even the original verses weren't like that great, considering where they were coming from. not from God, but from Prophet like Muhammad himself. And like a lot of it was copied, and later on things that were manipulated, etc., etc.
By the way, I want to
But
make a
still,
recommendation for a YouTube channel that you might want to
sure.
watch if you're looking for some more academic material on the history of Islam and Christianity. There's a channel
Yeah.
called Exploring the Quran and the Bible. Look it up. I think it's interesting. I haven't watched every single video. I can't vouch for, how accurate it is. I just watched a couple of videos and it seems interesting. So do your research, but that might be an interesting place to start. It's called Exploring the Quran and the Bible.
Okay, I have noted that down. I'll surely look into it.
Mhm.
Right now, I did like dig up a couple of books, which I'll surely read, and yeah, I'll look into this channel as well because at the end, these like reading these things from more like academic papers and like non-religious sources, it's it definitely gives you more clarity. And I think now like I always had my issues with Islam. Back then I remember as a very young person I had a lot of issues with the foremarriage thing in Islam. It just bothered me so much. As like I used to think it's so unfair. Like if if a man does not like that, that his wife would be with another man, it's the same for a woman. I don't want my man to be with another woman. I don't care if some god allows you to do that. It's just wrong. And so I guess that I was never fully convinced by it, but again, when you grow up, when you are surrounded in that environment with people who um, somehow they reward you for praying or for reading Quran, even if you don't understand a word of it, you just have to recite it. Yeah, again, that thing of reciting it, read it like in that sing-song way. Do you like? Are you aware of this thing?
Yeah, I used to
Because
read Quran that way. But yeah, I know that there's a lot of emphasis put on how you read
I
it and you
always
get...
found it so unnecessary. I always found it so unnecessary because I thought that what's important is that you understand what is written and not how you read it. Anyway, so
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
but I
that
never really voiced.
there's more to
Hmm.
it than that, because when people sing it in a certain way, it's almost hypnotic and it sounds more appealing
Hmm.
than just reading it.
It does.
So there's that appeal to it too, that maybe the it's designed to be sang that way so that more people are enchanted by it.
Yes, yes, you are right. But again, I found these things like from my personal perspective, I found them quite unnecessary. And then obviously, like even let's just suppose as a Muslim woman, I have mastered the art of reading Quran in a very beautiful way. I would still not really get a huge platform to how do you say uh sorry, I'm out of words. To
Are you saying that
show other
as
people my talent.
someone Are you saying that as someone who reads Quran in a beautiful way, if you're a woman, you're not allowed to do it publicly and gain some sort of notoriety from it like
Yeah,
men do?
yeah, yeah. That's what I meant.
Hmm.
So these were things that there was like always in the back of my mind, and because even though Islam says that women have been given rights, uh, women are just treated like queens in this religion, I was like, but I don't really see this thing translated into the reality. The reality
Hmm.
is a little bit different. I
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
see in Yeah.
Often when they say that women are treated like queens, there's always that example given of how there's a hadith about how heaven is under the feet of mothers, which it's promising a reward in the future, in the far future, after you die, which is not tangible. So women aren't treated like queens now; they'll be treated like queens in the future. And also, it's specifically linked to motherhood not being a woman. So there's strings attached to it.
Like, let's not get into the heaven thing, because that again, the things that made me uh angry somehow, it was like the Houris thing. God, it pissed me so much every single time I would hear about it. Like I remember this one time, we were in this sort of like webinar I don't know what you call that, but like a gathering with sheikhs speaking about the Quran, and and he would like talk about the Houris, and he was trying to explain that thing in the most non-sexual way possible, but it's almost impossible because the concept itself, it's very sexual. A man is going to get just remind me how many Houris, like 75 or 76, I don't know how many they were.
I think that's a weak narration, by the way. Some people say 72, but regardless, you're going to get a lot of heavenly sex maidens.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's a classic with the Quran, that numbers are never accurate. Some will say this number, some will say that
that's from
number.
the hadith, but yeah, whatever the number is, that the men are promised that.
Yeah, they're promised these like almost non-human creatures, virgin with skin like this. That's but like at the end, if you're gonna think, but like for what? What is gonna do with all of them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for intercourse.
But I don't know. I don't know, Aladdin. I just found this thing so disgusting. Like how I don't know how these things are so widely acceptable by people. Don't they think about these things? And again, getting back to the main point that just bothers me so much. Again, the pedophilia part. People who when I first discovered about it, I was so angry, and I thought that all these scholars, all these knowledgeable people, they surely know about this. And there are people who try to who defend it very openly. How they can be okay with it or right with it? Because trust me, there are a lot of people who are completely fine with it. They don't even try to defend it. They say that's how it was and it's normal, it's acceptable to marry children's females.
I think
that too, not boys.
it's just that people cannot go against, or believers cannot go against the word of God. And if they believe that Muhammad actually did it, or God said it's okay, they don't seem to have a choice. They think, if I think otherwise, I might, I might be tortured, or I might do something that people who deserve to be tortured would do. So I feel for them, but it's unsettling to live among them and to see how differently they think compared to you.
It is indeed. It's like people have with the religions, people have created this comfortable prisons from themselves. They surely are in ignorance, but it also brings them comfort in a way. But it has its negative effects. For example, that if you blindly believe into it, you are you don't use your mind anymore to when you do something. You say, if it's written I can do it, then I can do it. It is my God-given right to do it. Especially for men, considering the fact that men are the ones who are the ones who, in Islam, they are the caretakers. They are given the right to be responsible of women, and the head of the family. He has he can do, like, he can marry up to 4 wives, he can beat his wives. What else? Yeah, there's
So how does it feel to now no longer have to believe in these things or have to justify these things?
It feels great. Definitely, I don't feel conflicted anymore, and I don't feel like a hypocrite anymore. Because back then, I used to feel like a hypocrite. I was like, because another thing, yeah, the question that you put in the chat about the LGBTQ community. Since I like grew up in a non-Muslim country, I grew up believing that it's absolutely like no one should be condemned for their sexuality or their gender. It was just a normal thing for me to believe, and obviously it was it's yeah, again something
And
that goes completely against Islam.
so even as a Muslim,
So
you didn't agree with it, with Islam's view of the LGBT.
no,
Is
I
that what
did
you're
not
saying?
agree, but I really tried to um make sense of my religious beliefs. Tried to I tried to make them work, but it did not,
Yeah,
and I'm happy about
that's.
that.
Well,
Okay,
I'm glad that you're able to find your way out of all of that, and yeah, and I hope that talking about it helped relieve some of the stress that I'm sure you must be feeling
yes,
thinking about all of these things.
yes, definitely. But like even hearing stories of other people, it's just it's like it feels good that I'm not the only one.
Yeah, you're definitely not the only
Okay,
one.
I think my
Yeah.
time's up, so we can wrap this up.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling today, and yeah, sorry for to wrap it up so soon, but yeah, we're trying to also
No,
get
it's
to
all
other
right, no
callers.
problem.
Yeah.
Just two things. I really hope that this guy Sharif Kaber, he's an amazing guy. I wish that he gets out of their Egypt safe and sound. And same to you. Like keep up your good work. Keep making more videos. I love your content.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks
Okay.
a
Thank
lot,
you.
and take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right. Thanks again to the caller. Something that stood out to me was when she was talking about how she tried to make her beliefs make sense. And that's something that I like to remind people of, which is that there are a lot of believers out there who are well meaning, well intentioned, or at least not ill intentioned, who feel like they have no choice but to adopt their beliefs as is. Some of them try to question their beliefs, and some are not able to push past that questioning, but a lot of them are trying. And I applaud the caller for trying back when she was a believer, trying to make sense of her beliefs and trying to not just adopt what she thinks is harmful. So, yeah, thank you for that, caller. The next caller, I hope that you're ready because I'm adding you to the live stream now. Hey, Hellbound, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How's it going?
Great. Good. It's quite late here. It's almost 4 a.m. But I thought I'd stay up because I've been wanting to join the live stream for quite a while now. And I
Well,
saw the
thank you for
notification
waiting.
come up for today's live stream about a week ago, and I was
Yeah.
quite excited to join. Yeah. Um, I'm not very used to this format of discussion, especially since it's no clear topic to talk about. So maybe I might need some of your prompts as we go along. Um, but before I start, maybe I can say I really love your content. I found you about almost a year ago. Yeah, the first video I saw from you was about, I forgot what you call it. I think it's a letter addressing a mom from her daughter. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So that video really struck me. And since then, I've been watching your content quite religiously. Well, as ironic as that sounds, yeah. Maybe
Well,
I can start
I'm
off
glad you
with,
found the channel.
yeah, I love it. Maybe I can start off with how I began my journey of apostasy. I was quite a believer, not the perfect believer as we sin once in a while here and there, you know. But at 15, I would say it's quite a turning point for me as I started to become more religious and wanted to learn more about the religion. And I delved deeper into the scholars like Zakir Naik, Ahmad Didat. These people really brought some kind of influence onto me, and I think you would know as well how influential Zakir Naik can be, how swaying his words can be. Um, I began reading the Quran in English, and in hindsight, now that I'm an apostate, I look back at the things I've read back then, and I realize how oblivious I was to some of the weirder and crueler parts of the Quran that I was reading, and I was not aware of it at all. Like the parts on what your right hands possess, the parts about the sleepers of the cave, and yeah, looking back at it now, I'm thinking, how did I not notice all these inconsistencies and oddities in the Quran? But obviously, we're all blinded when we have this veil of religion in front of us. But funnily enough, I became quite disillusioned by the religion because of Zakir Naik himself. I think his mannerism is quite, what do you call it, abrasive. He can be quite
Zakir
arrogant at
Naik.
times. And yeah,
Yeah.
Zakir Naik. He can be quite arrogant at times and very dismissive of people who I, even at the time as a believer, I thought brought up very good points. I remember he had a discussion with an atheist about evolution, and the atheist brought up really good points, which was very difficult to rebut, about evolution being seen in real time in viruses and how that's proof that evolution can happen naturally. But he was extremely dismissive of his points. And even his reasoning for the way he justified that hell exists and the punishment for apostates, these things triggered some questions in my head that was difficult to forget. And at that time, I still identified as a Muslim, but I didn't realize that these things will come into play into my journey of apostasy in the future. And at that time, especially, I think I became a Quranist. I think a lot of Muslims who find it difficult to believe the more difficult parts of the religion fall into Quranism because it's just most things of the Quran are just vague and ambiguous enough for you to put your own interpretation onto it. Mm. And I
But was it
progressed
easy
to
to remain a
simply
Quranist?
no. I mean, it's definitely ambiguous enough, and I think I developed a point where I had my own head canon. I created my own head canon in my thoughts where, oh, maybe Allah isn't telling the truth. Maybe He doesn't really mean it when He said that He will burn everyone forever. You know, maybe it's for the greater good. It's just a lie for the greater benefit of mankind. But it also contradicts the fact that Allah is supposed to be truthful. So I would say, yeah, the answer to your question would be no, it's not easy to remain a Quranist as well. As much as I try to justify my religion and to make it make sense in my head, most of the time it causes more knots and contradictions rather than untying these knots. And soon after that, I would say when I was 18, 19, I became agnostic. I still thought I was Muslim, but I was an agnostic Muslim. And I think that label doesn't really jive well with Muslims. And most Muslims would consider me an apostate by then when I was 19 years old. To the point that I don't know, I didn't have enough conviction to, carry out my daily prayers. I didn't have enough conviction to go for my do Ramadan. And yeah, so these things, especially with the idea that hell is real and I can't possibly justify that hell is real, eternal punishment. Eternal punishment is very difficult to justify. And finally, I would say when I reached 22 years old, I stopped believing in free will. I understand from watching some of your previous live streams that you don't really believe in free will as well. Maybe you should do a video on that actually. But yeah, since I
Yeah,
stopped believing in free
I
will,
haven't made a video about it
sorry?
because I don't know if I have anything worth saying, because my position right now is I don't think anyone actually truly has free will. I think we're all to some extent
Yeah,
highly
yeah.
influenced or a product of our circumstances. But I
Mhm.
don't think that's enough to make a video about because something that people sometimes forget is that I'm not a very opinionated person. It's not that I want people to know what my opinion is and I care to share my views all the time. But I hear where you're coming from. Yeah. And simply put, I don't necessarily believe that we have free will.
Okay, I get where you're coming
Yeah.
from. For me, losing the belief in free will was the catalyst that that I required to completely renounce the religion. Because from what I understand, Islam rests upon the foundation that you choose your own decisions and you determine your own fate, whether you go to hell or heaven. Even that is unclear actually, but there's some semblance of that in the religion. So losing faith and free will to me completely disintegrates whatever remnants of belief I had in the religion. And losing the idea of free will it really took a toll on me. Um, it was difficult to continue living life the next day when you realize that you no longer have free will. Because you wake up and, "Oh, why am I even doing this? Is this even my own choice? Is anything I do worth doing anymore because I can't even control it?"
Wait, there's one thing I
And
want to
being
say
put
about
in that,
that. You
yeah,
said when you wake up and you realize that you no longer have free will, but you notice
when
the
you never
wording of
had.
that? I mean, yeah, either you never had it or you thought you had it, and just
Yeah, you
thinking
thought
that
you
you
had.
have free will, you give yourself the illusion of
Mm,
free will. So I know it sounds
mm,
crazy,
mm,
but you could live with the illusion of free will. You can continue to deceive yourself into thinking that you have free will. Um, so I think that's kind of how I operate. It's not that I believe I have free will, but I act as if I do, because what else is there
yeah,
to do? I can't just say, well, I'm just a product of my
I agree.
circumstances. I try to take action to change my circumstances. But yeah, it's not that you wake up and you no longer have free will, but it seems that way. Like you've lost the ability to fall under that illusion of free will.
What was the experience like for you though? Losing faith in free will, realizing that you don't have free will anymore. Because for me, it was really quite groundbreaking. I didn't know how to function for the next 2 weeks after that. What about you?
I think I ran into some of these issues even before leaving Islam, feeling
Mm,
powerless, feeling like there's a lot of problems in the world that I can't fix, and God is not doing anything about them, and not
mm,
understanding, how when it ties into free will, I can see that people's circumstances shape who they are, and how will people then be punished based on that? There's to some extent you can't just not take a criminal to jail using the defense that they had a hard life and that's what made them a
yeah.
criminal. But there's still consequences. We still got to save other people from them. Maybe we can rehabilitate them. But when it comes to Islam, that person's going to go to hell forever. That didn't make sense to
That's
me. So I
never
went
fault.
through that depressive state back as a Muslim. And by the time that I left Islam, I wasn't thinking about free will as much anymore.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. For me, I think I function the same as you in terms of free will. When I first found realized that I don't have free will anymore, yeah, I mean it was quite difficult for me. But as the years passed, I think I sort of got over it. Like you said, the illusion of free will is free will itself. And in a way, as long as you don't think about it, how bad can it be? You're just trying to live your life. You
Well,
think you
what
have power
does
over it, that's all that matters.
yeah, well, when you realize that you don't have free will, how does that change your decision making or your life?
Um, I wouldn't say it really changed my decision making or, in inverted commas, decision making. I would say it changed more the way I perceive life itself. I became more empathetic towards others, understanding towards others' behaviors. Sometimes people upset me, and I could rightly be upset as well towards them. But think back, they don't even have that position to upset me. So how could I? I try to be more understanding in that sense. Yeah, I don't think it changed the way I made decisions, but it did make me, rethink every single thing I've done in my life. Um, even to a point, I even considered committing suicide because it really reached that point for me, losing religion and losing your realizing you never had free will all at the same time. I think it pushes someone like me to the edge. And even then, but I didn't kill myself because even then I realized even if I choose to kill myself right now, that's not even my choice. So does it really matter? I'll just continue doing what I'm doing.
So you chose to continue doing what you're doing because of
Because people still depend on me. people still love me, and it's not their choice to love me. They love me out of their. It's not a choice to love me, but they love me. So I will continue to. I'm not sure. Is this making sense?
To some
But
extent, it
yeah,
is, yeah. So
mm,
have you found something sustainable to keep you going? Or is it just that feeling of obligation to your loved ones?
there's this thing called, I believe they call it long-term hedonism or sustainable hedonism. I think hedonism, typically people connote it with ideas of ego, pride, and short-term pleasures. But the alternative version of hedonism is called long-term hedonism, where you try to live your life in search of pleasure, but not the types of pleasure that would destroy you in the long term. An example could be maintaining relationships I have with my friends for a long-term future, maybe exercising more often so I can have a more comfortable future. I think that
So are you
helps a
just
lot
saying
with
seeking happiness? Is that what you're saying?
seeking happiness. Because, you know, losing religion, you lose that quote unquote objective purpose that you had in life as a Muslim, where you live only to serve God, you live for the afterlife. But now I have no more afterlife. I never had afterlife. So now I have to live for what I have now, in the present and in the future.
Yeah,
And
that's
although
something that
life may not be,
I want to highlight to people that sometimes theists confuse what you're describing as depression because of not believing, period. Like they think that without God, without
yeah,
religion, you'd be depressed. But I think it's more, from what you're describing,
losing
the
it.
absence of what you expected to be there. So you grew up with ideas about
Yeah.
purpose and life and God, and when they're taken away, then you'll have a difficult time coping with it. But it's not
Mm,
because someone who grew up with, not believing in God would have felt the same way. Probably not. But yeah, it's a difficult transition.
yeah, I agree. And I think that's the main message I want to bring across in my short time here. Losing your religion is not a very easy process to go through because as being born a Muslim, you're not raised to be able to be equipped with living life without God. Yeah. Growing up, everything that was inculcated within you in your childhood was about God. You do this for God, you do that for God. You suffer for God, you suffer for good deeds. And losing that central aspect of your purpose and meaning in life can really take a toll on you. But there are other alternatives to what you have right now as Muslims, let's say. Um, yeah, as of now, I'm just trying to live life to be as comfortable as possible because I'm stuck here anyway, and people love me despite them just being biological machines. I am a biological machine myself, and yeah, I think different people will leave the religion with different ideas of what is their new purpose and meaning in life. For me, I found mine through this sustainable alternative hedonism framework, and for others, it might be different. I'm curious what kind of, let's say, framework you follow to replace what you had before in Islam.
So the word, the phrase hedonism or long-term hedonism sounds
Yeah, I forgot
wrong
what's.
to
I think
me.
sustainable hedonism
Or
or long term.
sustainable
It sounds
hedonism.
wrong.
Uh,
Sounds like
uh,
an oxymoron, right?
or no, it's just that the word hedonism, I've always thought of it as a negative thing, or
Yeah, yeah.
that accusation that you left Islam because you're following your desires or you worship your desires, and if you don't worship Allah, you're worshiping something else. And so
So I'm going to the
reflexively,
stereotype.
yeah, I don't think that it's that simple as like I'm worshiping this object or this belief. That's not how I view it at all. Um, I have something similar, but I don't necessarily call it hedonism. It's just seeking happiness and trying to better
Mm,
the world for myself and people around me, and I do that through minimizing harm and maximizing happiness or well-being.
yeah,
Now,
very
of course,
utilitarian.
Yeah, that's and it's not simple. You know, I can't tell you that this applies to every single situation perfectly. There's always going to be some thinking to do. You know, it's
Yeah,
sometimes
agree, agree.
theists say as if like they have a book that tells them what to do in every situation, but that's not true. You know, there's a lot of ambiguity in religion as well. So we already employ that instinctively and have been employing it whether we were religious or not. So it's just continuing to do that without the laws that have to do with God. So my purpose right now is to live a happy life and try to aid as many people as I can in living a happy life. That's where I find purpose.
Okay, I see. I don't have much else to add on to this live stream unless you have some questions for me.
None that come to mind, but I appreciate you talking about this because, like I said, there are many people who can relate to that, and yeah, I'm glad that you're being open about your struggles.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. I hope you have a
Take
good
care.
night. Yeah. Get some sleep. Bye-bye.
You too. You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks again to the caller. Now I'm setting up for the last caller of today. NT, please get ready because I'm adding you to the live stream soon. I just want to say thank you everyone for watching or listening for this long. If you've been here the whole time, I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm going to add the caller now. Hey, NT, can you hear me?
Yo, yeah.
How's it going?
I'm going good. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Excuse my shitty mic. I'm in the process of getting a new one.
That's okay. Just, I guess, try not to speak directly into the mic because there's a little bit of distortion there.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Right, cool. So, first of all, happy Mental Health Month and Pride Month.
Thank you. Yeah, same to you.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right. A little bit exhausted, to be honest, but other than that, I'm doing fine. How about you?
Yeah, it's a long stream. I'm good too. Thank you. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sort
So
of,
yeah, tell me a bit about yourself and what you want to talk about today.
So I'm an ex-Muslim, socially ex-Muslim, from Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
You probably had a bunch of us before, right? Malaysians.
I've spoken to a bunch here. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just another ex-Muslim in Malaysia. Socially speaking, family doesn't know, few friends know.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, systemically, I am not able to leave the religion because of the laws and the way it's structured. I might face death penalty. And the thing that I want to talk about a bit is kind of sexism in Islam that pertains to men. Right? We don't really talk about misandry that much in Islam.
Sure.
So
tell us a little bit about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess the biggest biggest form of like sexism we face is the idea that men are basically like sexually carnal animals in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of harms everyone, women and men especially. And most laws are based on this idea. Like the idea that, you know, women have to cover up because of men, right? And men can't do certain things to other men because we're just viewed as sexually charged creatures that are basically unable to inhibit ourselves. And this actually a lot of problem comes out of this because of this. A lot of laws in predominantly Islamic countries, they don't accept rape or sexual assault that happens to men where the perpetrator is a woman, because the idea is that men cannot get raped by women. And viewing men as like sexually carnal animals is kind of like perpetuating that stereotype. And it's one of the things where it's like super harmful. And I don't understand why this is, because even in Islam, like I think there were texts that show that how I think Prophet Yusuf, he was kind of harassed by women, like assaulted by women. And there was a whole story about, I don't remember what kind of what tribe, but they were basically raping young boys, and they got punished for it or something. But somehow, when it comes to making Islamic laws, it somehow like got swept under the rug. People don't really like talk too much about it. And so this idea that there's a lot of, I've met a lot of men who have been like harassed or assaulted and raped by women, usually older women who are in the families, and they always get excused by it because and the justification is that if an older woman touches a young boy, it comes from a place of care and nurture, which goes back to traditional gender roles. But when it happens to, like, if it's an older man touching a young boy, it's like, okay, that's or a young girl, it's like, okay, that's no, right? As it should be.
Right.
And a little bit of
Yeah.
a little bit of yeah, and a little bit about myself. I'm not gonna trauma dump or anything, but I was S8 as a kid growing up by a few women, and I sort of internalized this as like, oh, okay, I guess that's just normal. I guess like guys kind of supposed to want it. And when I finally went to therapy and it was labeled as assault, and I finally realized what happened to me, I decided to open up to my family about this. I grew up in a predominantly female household. I grew up around women a lot, so I went to them to talk about this, and they kind of said the same thing, like, it's fine. The woman who touched you was like, she wasn't having any bad intentions. So what happened to you was like, it's fine. Like, don't think too much about it. But then when I give them a gender flip version, it became like, oh, it's wrong because he's obviously, if it's an older man touching a younger girl, it's obviously comes from a place of lust, and
Mhm.
that kind of scarred me a little bit, to be honest. Yeah, it's kind of heavy thing to talk about. It's also like this strong, like in Islam, there's a strong social pressure for men to conform to hegemonic masculinity. Like, you have to be the protector, you have to be the provider. If you don't fit in this category, you are basically, you're not a man. Basically, like, you are looked down upon, you are shunned aside, right? And I think we even have a word for it, youth, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's basically used. I think it's exclusively used against men to shame them for not being able to control women or their household. And all these shaming tactics that Islam use, like, against men, is kind of, yeah, it's really, it runs deep, and it can really, like, perpetuate the very same stereotype that they think is true, but it's not true. That men are just innate carnal creatures, always just filled with lust, and it's just, I don't know, like, what do you think about this?
Well, I first of all, I'm sorry that that has happened, and I'm glad that you have finally found a way to deal with it, and someone to tell you to validate that yes, that was assault, and I'm glad that you're no longer still questioning, whether that was assault or not. So I'm sorry that happened, and I'm glad that you've survived, and you're here to talk about it. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, when you tell men that they're predators, and then you label them things for not being jealous enough or controlling enough and so on. It's going to make men more likely to behave in the way that they think they're supposed to, or the way that they think that they're destined to, that their biology commands them to, rather than helping men behave better. It teaches them that it's inevitable that they will misbehave. So it almost gives them a pass for misbehaving sometimes, even if it's officially, it's not halal to harass a woman, but it's blamed on the woman often, and women are supposed to cover up to avoid it and so on. And men are, boys are going to be boys. So it just ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I try to approach more like, one of the ways I try to convince, I guess is the wrong word. Like, I don't force people to leave their religion, but I have a few friends who are questioning Islam, and I find that when you talk about sexism against men in Islam, kind of works to kind of de-radicalize them. Like, hey, you're not this bestial creature that goes around thinking of sex and raping women all the time. I mean, you're better than that, and Islam is
Mhm.
not giving you that opportunity to think about that of yourself. Kind of like how we educate women. Like, if you wanna like, Islam is kind of really oppressive for them. Like, telling them this will kind of like help them, I guess, in a way. So like I'm coming at it from this kind of angle. Like this is why I kind of push against, like I push about misandry in Islam to men, trying to show
Have you
them
had any
it's wrong.
success with that?
None so far, but I have had a few friends who are starting to question their beliefs, like plant a seed and then let it grow. Every now and then, just water it a bit. But yeah, it has to make them start to question themselves and their beliefs on who they are. Like a lot of them would say, "Huh, if a woman rapes me, I'll be happy." Then I'm like, no, and I'll tell you why. And a friend of mine, who he wasn't raped, but he was assaulted, molested as a child by, I think it was his babysitter or something, his nanny. He said there was nothing wrong with it. He was okay with it. He doesn't see it as a molestation. But then now he's having trouble developing relationships with women. It manifests in different ways. And I pointed that out to him, and he realized it. And yeah, this idea that men are just sexual creatures is harming. Another one that I think we should talk about more is something that both of us probably go through. Every boy goes through this as an Islam. You know what that is, right?
I'm not sure what you're hinting at. Are you talking about circumcision?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's something that is normalized, and I've done a lot of reading about this. I used to be the ones who's like, I don't care. Who cares? Then the more I read into it, the more I realize that it's super harmful. And the benefit is really, there's really no.
My position on it right now is that I think it's probably harmful, but I try not to look up too much about it because I can't change the past. I'm circumcised. It is what it is. But if it ever comes to, if I ever have a child and it's a boy, then I definitely need to think hard about it. And I don't think I'd be circumcising them, but then I would do my research. But for the time being, I feel like I'm in willful ignorance about it because there's not much that I could do to change it.
Yes, and here's the thing. Do you feel bad? Like, if you realize that it was such a harmful decision, do you feel like there was something taken away from you? Like it affected you in a certain way?
I think I would, yeah.
Yeah, and that fear is a very real fear. Something that I went through too. And something that a lot of pro-circumcised men also kind of say, like they kind of don't want to talk about it because they don't want to admit that what happened to them was wrong and they're losing out on something. And I'm not gonna lie, I got body dysmorphia from this. Seeing other men like just natural, and I'm like, and then when I read up about how it's actually better to have it than not having a foreskin than not, it's By the way, are you okay talking about this? If you're not comfortable, we can move on.
I mean, we're kind of already talking about it already.
And
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think there's no use in crying over spilt milk, like what happened already happened. But it becomes more of a question if you're going to inflict it on someone else. So I think that you don't sound like that you would do that in the future. And yeah, I try not to overthink it because I can't change the past, but I can change the future.
yeah, exactly. That's kind of the position that I'm on as well, because I'm against it. I'm anti, but I know that I can't change what I've done. Even though I once considered undergoing foreskin reconstruction surgery, which I figured is not worth it because it's just aesthetic at this point. You won't get back your lost nerves. But I am actively against because I don't want that to happen to other people. I don't want, and it's not just the boys, by the way. Like girls this happens to girls as well, especially in my country. And it's a up, it's a I'm going up against the hill, right? Because Muslim majority country, I'm talking about something like this. But the best I can do is just promote more knowledge on this issue to other people, so they don't do it to their children. That's like the stance that I'm taking about this.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay, there's another story relating to the social pressures of men that happened to me recently. It was during Eid. It's so I work on an oil and gas on an oil platform, right? I'm in the oil and gas sector. So I've missed out on basically 3 years worth of Eid and all the birthdays and all the death that I missed. And so like this year was the first year I get to celebrate Eid with my family. I'm already like non-practicing, but at least I got to meet my family. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping from different topics right now. So what I did was I usually get a mani and pedi done, and for this time I decided to paint my nails black because I've always wanted to try that out. I had no idea that my family would have such a huge reaction to it, to the point where they kind of said, if you don't remove it, we're going to lock you in the house. You're not going to leave, and you can't see anyone.
But you're an
So
adult, right? So they're saying
yeah,
they're
I'm an
going to
adult.
lock you in the house if you have nail
Yeah.
polish.
Yeah, I know. Because unfortunately, I still live with my parents for a bit. I own a place, just it's still not done with the construction yet. It's still, I think a few months it'll be done. So I'm kind of forced to live with them for a moment. So yeah, they kind of like control me even though I'm an adult. Like, and then it's like you got all the emotional manipulation happened, the blackmailing happened, and it's just I had no idea it'd be this bad. And it seems like a non-issue, but it was like it's a big thing. Everyone in the family knew, and everybody
No,
was like,
it certainly isn't a non-issue. I could tell you that.
yeah, it's such a. So I had to forcibly remove it because I used gel. I didn't use like a typical nail polish, so I got to go back to the salon, had it removed, and it kind of messed up my nails in a bit, which is against what I wanted to do in the first place. And so all that happened, and then I just sort of, as a reaction to it, I sort of like just shut down. I don't really talk to my family anymore because I know if I talk to them, maybe kind of useless. I'm the only non-Muslim or ex-Muslim amongst a sea of conservatives,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like just yeah, this whole restrictive masculinity thing is kind of strong, and it's I usually don't pay too much mind on it because I usually don't really feel that kind of masculinity on me. Like this is the first time it has happened this bad, and it kind of like it took away my form of self-expression and who I really am.
And how do you feel now that you no longer talk to them?
Mentally peaceful. So yeah, it's not the solution, of course, but it's the best I can do for now. And yeah, I don't know. Nuts. What would you do if you were in that situation?
I mean, it's difficult without knowing exactly how your parents are, and if there's, or your family in general, and if there's hope in talking to them. So I can't really say, but I just have to remind you that your well-being matters the most. You know, that you can't pretend to be someone you're not just to get along with people. You're never going to have a good relationship with them if, to that extent, you know, they can turn that oppressive in a second towards you. So I applaud you for putting some distance, and I hope that you find your peace with or without them, and that you don't compromise to be accepted.
Thanks, man. I guess our time is kind of up, I guess.
Yeah, we're getting close to wrapping up. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or mention before you go?
Interestingly, I made a whole point, but kind of blanking out right now. Kind of nervous because I'm talking to a celebrity.
I'm not a celebrity, but you've made many points. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
Sharing here, yeah.
So yeah, I guess as a conclusion, I guess as a wrap up, I would say, yeah, I mean, we should also talk about misandry in Islam and how it affects men and how we could use it to kind of, convince men to leave that shitty religion and I guess become better people and see themselves as more than just a sexual object. Yeah.
Well, I hope whoever needs to hear that hears it. Yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing all this with us today, and I hope that life continues to improve for you.
Thank you too, bro.
Yeah. Take care, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or
You too,
evening.
bro. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks again to the caller for sharing. Yeah, I don't know what to say to add to that. Today's been a long live stream. Spoke to a bunch of people. I appreciate every single one of them for calling today. Sometimes I didn't always ask the right questions or, continue the thread of the conversation the way that I should have, but it's difficult to take it all in at once. But yeah, if you'd like to join as a caller, if you'd like to speak your mind, keep an eye out. I post these live streams on Mondays usually for Wednesdays. And if you want to join as a caller, just join 30 minutes before the scheduled time and the link will be pinned in the live chat. The queue fills up very, very quickly. Today we had a lot of callers. I didn't expect to have as many as we did. So if you want to join next week, keep an eye out, and I'm looking forward to your contribution. And thank you everyone for joining, listening, watching, commenting. I love it when you leave your favorite timestamps in the comments after the live stream is over. So please do that. Those of you who do, I appreciate it a lot. And special thank you to the members of the community, patron members, YouTube members, and those of you who would like to join the Discord server for the channel, just join as a patron or YouTube member and follow the links in the description to join the Discord server. So thank you everyone again for your support. And as always, think critically,